Right. Now we're recording, I'll say for the record that the agenda has been approved and we're moving on to inducting of new members.
Okay, so this one is for Andrew.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew. I, Andrew, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America and the state of Colorado and the charter and ordinances of the city of Boulder, and faithfully perform the duties of the office of a member of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, which I am about to enter.
There we go. I, Andrew Bernstein, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America and the state of Colorado and the charter and ordinances of the city of Boulder, and faithfully perform the duties of the office of a member of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, which I am about to enter.
Would you like to do the same as you did?
So I will be arrested. I do.
You have to read it. I am.
I am Seeger, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America, the state of Colorado, and the charter and ordinances of the city of Boulder, and faithfully perform the duties of the office of a member of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, which I am about to enter.
All right, thank you.
Congratulations, and welcome to the Park and Recreation Advisory Board.
Thank you.
As a bit of an icebreaker, if we can spend just a couple of minutes going around the table, the crowd members, and we can say just a word or two about why we want to have crowd and what we like about the parks department and facilities. So you can start with.
Sure. So I joined the Pratt because I believe deeply in having a really strong Parks and Rec system as part of a city's health and well-being. And I am a big user of the park system along with my two little kids and my wife. And so I feel like I'm a big stakeholder in what we do. And I've always been so impressed by Boulder's park system. And I just wanted to be a part of making it even better, stewarding the facilities that we have and, leaving a legacy of great Parks and Rec systems for my kids and, other people to come. So that's why I'm here.
Anna?
I am here because similar to Elliot, I believe that active childhoods are really important to children's healthy development. That's in both indoor and outdoor activities and athletics. And my children go to the bilingual school, and I have seen that many or pretty much all of the Latino families that I know are not aware of the financial benefits that are available to them or of the facilities that are available. So I am here to try and make the systems more inclusive to the Parks and Rec program.
Great.
My name is Sunny Vanderstar, and similar, I've used the parks for many years now. I've been here since '96, and I've resided in South Boulder since '99, and just a big user of the rec centers and parks. And now I'm a mother, so I've got two kids who are using the parks and recs, and also just want to, I got on the board because I just really wanted to understand, honestly, how this all works and, use my voice to champion some changes, hopefully in South Boulder, because that's where we live, and just, really try to figure out how to make the best use of our resources. We've got so many amazing resources and ideas, and, I just feel like I wanted to help out.
Great. I'm Chuck Brock, and I raised two kids here who are now adults. So we were very heavy users of the park system and recreation facilities, and we loved every minute of it. I still use them a lot. North Boulder Park is my favorite. I love seeing the diversity of uses, the amazing number of people there, how active it is. It just makes me feel good about being in Boulder. I'm interested in pushing the department on issues of sustainability and environmentalism, especially as it relates to climate change and transportation. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to be on the board.
I'm Andrew Bernstein, and I had a number of reasons, like everyone else, for wanting to be a member of this board. But first of all, I believe broadly in the power of Parks and Recreation as instruments for health and wellness and social equity in members of our community of all age, every age, not just children. And I also believe it's important that we, as a department, strive for equity and access and inclusion. And that's something that I hope to represent, despite my disposition as a straight white man here on this board. I do have a disability, and I hope to help to represent needs of that community as well.
And is Jason on?
Yes.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jason.
hey everyone. Sorry to not be there in person on this momentous day for Anna and Bernie, and also for Chuck and Elliot. Sorry I couldn't be there to join you all. This is hard to go last because I think everyone kind of said the reasons, my original reasons for joining. But I think as I've been on, I guess starting my end of my third year, starting my fourth year, I guess kind of thinking about it, it's a great level of involvement in city politics. It's, everybody loves the parks. It's great to be part of the parks, kind of thinking of the future of the parks and all of the many things you all said. But it's not, it's not overly contentious where we lose kind of friends and neighbors over some of these issues. These are kind of fun issues to discuss, and while difficult and sometimes heated, it doesn't get to the level of other issues in the city. And so I've really, that's maybe not the reason why I joined, but that's been one of the things I've appreciated since being on the board, is just kind of that kind of middle level of involvement in middle, not meaning importance, but just kind of controversial level, in terms of being involved in city issues that matter and for the future, but also, like I said, not issues that are so divisive that are, that really kind of tear people apart. So, yeah, but then in addition to everything everyone else said as well. So welcome to Bernie and Anna. And I think, I don't know if Anita is there, but I might be the last one to speak here.
Yeah, I think you are the last.
Okay.
All right, so thank you, everyone. Next, we have officer elections, and I'll turn it over to Rosa to conduct those.
Okay, yes, I'm going to have Scott help me with this. I have two nominations to announce. We have a nomination for chair and a nomination for vice chair, and I'm going to hand it over to Scott to handle the process.
Absolutely. So our nomination for chair is Chuck Brock. And at this time, before we get into a motion and a vote, we do want to open it up. If anyone else is interested in serving as chair, they have the opportunity to say so now. Or if anyone would like to nominate anyone else for chair, now is the opportunity. I'll pause for just a minute to see if anybody has any thoughts on that. Okay, hearing none. Chuck, would you like to say any words before we take a vote?
Sure, just a couple of quick things. My objectives as chair are to make sure that everyone's voices are heard and no one feels excluded, and everyone feels like they're getting an opportunity to say what they want to say. At the same time, the other main task of the chair is to move the meetings along as briskly as is consistent with the first primary issue. So I'm going to try to balance that if I'm elected, and if I'm not doing a good job, please just tell me. I really have not much of an ego at all, and you can tell me I'm doing a bad job, and I won't take it badly, especially if it comes along with a suggestion on how they're.
Great, thank you. Any discussion, or we can entertain a motion?
I move to have Chuck Brock elected our chair.
Great. Do we have a second? Perfect. Because this is an elected position, we will do a roll call vote. So I'll ask Rosa to go through and call each of your names, and you can respond by saying aye or nay. So Rosa, back to you.
Yes, Jason Unger,
Yes.
Elliot Hood,
Yes.
Bernie Bernstein,
Aye.
and Danita's not here. Anna Seaver,
Aye.
Sunny Van Star.
I,
Great, thank you very much.
All right, congratulations. So we had one nomination for vice chair, and that was Elliot Hood. Again, I'll pause for a moment in case anyone would like to nominate themselves or someone else. All right, hearing none. Would you like to say a few words, Elliot?
Sure. First of all, I'm honored to be nominated. I want to echo exactly what Chuck said about governance, making sure that everybody's voices are heard, that the department is responsive to the PRAB's questions and requests, which you guys have always been, but just keeping that as a priority, making sure that we are engaging the community as much as possible, and also to move the meetings along and ensure that we are being respectful of people's volunteer time on this body. Thank you.
And staff's paid time.
Right.
All right, any comments or or a motion to have Elliot serve as vice chair?
I'll motion for Elliot to serve as our vice chair.
Perfect.
Second,
Go Chuck. All right. Rosa, I'll turn it back over to you again for the roll call vote.
Right. Chuck Brock,
aye.
Jason Unger,
Aye.
Bernie Bernstein,
Aye.
Anna Seaver,
Aye.
Sunny Vanderstar.
I,
All right, congratulations, Elliot.
So thank you so much for that. And now we will go to future board items delivered by our Deputy Director, Scott Shepherd.
Absolutely. So thanks, everyone. And I appreciate having a little patience with me as I sit in for Ally. Ally does a tremendous job providing updates and whatnot. This is my first opportunity to do that, so it's good to be here. I've heard during my time here how PRAB members would like to really be involved in the community. And we do have a couple of events this coming Saturday that I would like to invite you to. Saturday morning at 8 a.m. at McGuckins, there'll be a tree giveaway. They'll go quick. So I would imagine that'll be under an hour, trees will be gone, but certainly welcome to be there to help out if you would like. Also on Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., we've got the Child Friendly Cities Initiative launch. And that's an opportunity to really start to hear more about the impact that the city intends to have on children in our community. So really excited about that. I'll be down and visiting that as well. And that's going to be at the band shell. And so I would encourage you to consider attending that. We've got a couple of presentations today that Mark and Jackson are prepared for, but coming up in May, we'll continue to talk about our CIP. And Mark has presented a little bit of information on the CIP so far. He continues to do work with each of our teams to prepare and think about the future assets and what we need to do there. And so that'll be coming up in May. We'll also have some additional information coming up later on in June and whatnot. One of the big updates will be Jackson talking about and Stacy talking about our budget and our fee schedule that you got a taste of last month. So we have a lot going on within the department and excited to share information with you tonight. Are there any questions that I can answer?
can you discuss more what the event's gonna be at 11 on Saturday?
That is a great question. I know it's kind of a kickoff celebration. And so I'm assuming you'll hear a little bit about the vision for some of the involvement and really what we're trying to do is collectively throughout the entire city, really work towards having a plan, a master plan, if you will, for how we're going to meet the needs of children in our community. And it's above and beyond Parks and Recreation. This is a citywide initiative. And so hopefully you'll hear about breaking down some of the barriers and making sure that we're providing inclusive services. A committee is being formed here in the next month or two internally to the city of Boulder. And our hope would be that over the next year, we start to establish that vision and create that master plan and then move towards implementation. So I think you'll hear a little bit about that. I haven't been real involved in the conversations as of yet. I know Allison is the sponsor for this project and kind of spearheading it. So I can't do it justice in telling you what it's about, but I would definitely encourage you to be there. And then we can certainly give an update in May as well as to where it's at.
And specifically, like, I know it's about kids, but is it for kids? Would I come alone or with my children?
Sure. You might have just had a
Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, just because it's been in the background for about a year or so and on board. And so Darren Wagner, whose name's up on the screen, our senior landscape architect, is actually going to be the project manager for the city on the project. And as Scott mentioned, yes, bring your kids Saturday. Absolutely, please do that. And one of the nice things about timing of this, the Child Friendly Cities Initiative, and it's UNESCO driven. So it'll be the first city in the US to get that label. So it's in partnership with Growing Up Boulder, who actually provided the framework for a UNESCO Child Friendly City about 10 years ago. It's all come back around to say, could you be the lead on this? And part of it is the Broncos sold some land, which led to Boulder receiving 2.1 million for youth projects. So this plan will help inform the spending direction for that money. So please feel free to reach out to Darren for specific questions because she knows more than any of us put together.
Did other communities receive grants from that same sale?
Yeah, I think
It's
at
approximately,
this point I defer to Jackson.
yeah, I believe it's about 30 cities. It's anyone who had provided tax funding for when the stadium was originally constructed. There was a stipulation that each city got a proportional share for their contribution at the time of the sale of the team, not the stadium. So Denver is the largest recipient. We get about $2.1 million. The smallest community gets $600. So we're actually in a pretty good spot.
Any other questions?
I just want to make a comment that I think I'm really excited about this department events and items of interest section here. I think this is exactly what we've been talking about before in terms of laying out upcoming events very clearly that are that involve the parks. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Scott Carpenter Pool will open May 1st. So we've had a lot of feedback. I know you all get feedback extensively on where we're at with lap availability and pools. And I will say that our staff has done a tremendous job in hiring and recruiting lifeguards and aquatic staff, and we're in really good shape right now to kick off the summer and open Scott Carpenter Pool on May 1st.
Okay, great. Any other comments? Okay, next up is public participation, and for the new board members as well as members of the public, if we have an action item, something we're voting on later in the meeting, the public participation and public testimony related to that item would occur before the discussion of that later in the meeting. But because we don't have any action items, the only opportunity for public participation will be held at the beginning of the meeting, which is this segment now. So just to explain in the future, we might have two pieces of public participation in some of our meetings and why that happens. Okay, so this portion of the meeting is for members of the public to communicate ideas or concerns to the board regarding parks and recreation issues for which a public hearing is not scheduled later in the meeting. The public is encouraged to comment on the need for recreation programs and facilities as they perceive them. And all speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Depending on the nature of your matter, you may or may not receive a response from the board or staff after you deliver your comments. But rest assured, we're always listening and very much appreciate the feedback we're hearing from you. And I believe we have 4 people signed up for public comment. Is that right, Rosa?
Yes. do want to go ahead and say though that all remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenities, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupt or otherwise impede the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. And participants are required to sign up in advance and use the name they are commonly known by. Thank you, Chuck. Do you have the list, Chuck?
Yes. The first speaker will be Don Bergel, followed by Larry McKeel. And let's let Rosa get her timer up and then she'll unmute Don and he can speak.
Hi, my name's Don Bergel. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name's Don Bergel. I'm a 10-year Boulder resident, and I want to raise concerns regarding the acute shortage of tennis courts for the rising demand in Boulder. I'm a passionate recreational player and a captain of several adult tennis teams who play in sanctioned leagues with teams from around the Denver Boulder area. And a league match requires 4 or 5 courts in good condition. And today, only Centennial Middle School in CU South meet that criteria. And the CU South courts, as you know, are soon to be going away. So there are hundreds of public court league players in Boulder. And as an accessible outdoor and socially distanced activity, tennis participation rose rapidly during the pandemic, and we're critically short of facilities. At Centennial Middle School, we have contention with the students from Boulder High and their own leagues. And as a team captain, I've had city-issued reservations in hand only to find the JV high school girls matches using the courts. And nobody wins in that situation. And I can tell you it was awful to have to request that the school coaches remove the 13-year-old girls because a group of older men had prior reservations for a match against a team they're driven all the way from Thornton. It was downright embarrassing. When we play at Longmont, at Louisville, Arvada, Denver, Erie, or Thornton, the public facilities are so much nicer, they're better maintained, they're more accessible. Visitors are amazed at how a city like Boulder can be so poorly equipped. So I'm commenting tonight to raise awareness in hopes that the P&R leadership can work together with the tennis community and possibly with the naturally aligned pickleball community to develop facilities comparable to our Front Range neighbors. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Don. Next up, we'll have Larry McKeel, followed by Fran Sheets.
You ready, Larry?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, Prab. My name is Larry McKeel. I've been a Boulder resident for 33 plus years and an avid user of city parks and rec services for over 20. And I've been interacting with Parks and Rec staff for the better part of the last 15, primarily by running open water swims for the reservoir and Boulder Aquatic Masters. I noticed that during the study session earlier this month, someone raised a question. Is there a way to have people say fees are high to reach out so that they have input? This was on page 19 of your packet, the 5th bullet. This is a great lead into my comment for this evening. The fees are too high for recreational aquatic user groups. Boulder Aquatic Masters picks up where the city services have chosen to stop. NAM used to be under the purview of the city many years ago. The community's desire for a program such as ours has kept it vibrant for the past 3 decades. Our efficient use of scarce pool space and peer support aligns with the recreational category's goal of promoting physical and mental health well-being here in Boulder. Exiting the pandemic a few years ago, open water swims were assumed by the city resources. These were a failure for a variety of reasons. BAM stepped in to bring it back to life last year. The open water swims out at the reservoir have been a self-supported labor of love. I faced many of the same issues that the city does in finding lifeguards. Unlike the city that can pay higher bonuses, increase starting wages, or advertise broadly, my challenge is compounded to seek guards as an all-volunteer group. In addition, our program is charged for entering before hours to set up for their swim. We are also charged small craft permit and boat storage fees. This is all to bring it over 1,000 entrance fee-paying or 1,000 entrance fee-paying participants to the reservoir during the early morning summer hours. That's over 10,000 additional hours in entrance fees, along with nearly 2,000 in program fees being added to the reservoir's bottom line. BAM has done the heavy lifting so that all can find the joy of swimming. The city just has to station a gate attendant to collect the money. Back to the question about high fees, user group outcry over the pricing has gotten louder with the most recent private rental rates published in March, because of the 300% increase, as well as the characterization that these user groups are subsidized. As presented here, we return more financial value to the city than we derive. Aquatic user groups are not providing a limited community benefit. We are the community. In any given practice, you'll find that aquatic enthusiasts in their 20s through their 70s, or even 80s. These are teachers, scientists, and students, others that live and work in Boulder. We should be categorized as a recreational group, and we should not be asked to pay an exorbitant fee to run a safe program that generates revenue for the city.
Thank you, Larry. Next up, we have Fran Sheets, who will be followed by Luis Garza.
Participants. Screen share.
And can you raise your hand? Are you able to do that on Zoom? Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
Unmute. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks for not giving up. My name is Fran Sheets, and I was on the Landmarks Board for 7 years. I came off a year ago, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about, and hopefully give a really, really brief explanation, which I would be happy to go to in detail with anybody on the board, about the process that surrounded the events from last year when we tried to simply expand the bandshell boundary in Central Park. It's so complicated. It's hard to know how to begin in 3 minutes, but the issue became sticky, I think, because there was a failure of everyone to communicate. And I think both the Landmarks Board and the PRAB were not given information in a timely fashion. And the process failed at City Council about 6 months after it began, simply because people didn't understand what the purpose was and why we were doing it. We would like this time, and council ended up asking that instead of expanding the boundary, that the whole area become a historic district, which is far more complex and far more time consuming. But because they told us that we could do it in this year, in 2023, and nothing had been done, or no one had spoken to any of the boards from January to April, and they were meeting every week, it was decided that some of the citizen groups, the Friends of the Bandshell, the Friends of the Tea House, and Historic Boulder, to put forth a an application to share with everyone. And I hope that we can keep this as an open process as we move along. So I'm just telling you that this is happening. If you want details, I'm glad to talk to anybody. And we will share as much as we can. We'll make our meetings as open as we possibly can and try to move this through the city in a rather quick fashion, maybe this year if we can. So please feel free to contact me. I'm available to talk to anybody, and we will continue to update you as the process continues. So thanks a lot for listening, and I hope you remain with us, and I hope you ask questions, and I hope you can join us in the process. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you, Fran. Our final speaker is Luis Garza.
Lisa, if you're there, could you let us know?
Might be muted, but hand raise can,
That's Patrick.
yeah, but if she can raise a hand.
Luis, can you raise your hand?
Maybe unmute Patrick if he's got their household name or something. That's true.
I think you have to mute Fran. Yeah,
Check Patrick.
could be. She shares it.
I don't know.
Could be a shared household or something and a different name on the computer.
Dr. Garza, are you signed on under your own name? If you're not, we need you to raise your hand and let us know what name you're signed on under.
Hello, my name is Patrick O'Rourke. I did register to speak tonight, but I'm not on your list.
Oh. Maybe
I
there's a
registered,
miscommunication.
I registered at the beginning after your last session, so will you permit me to move forward?
Do you think there was an issue with the name mix-up, perhaps, Rosa?
I never got the email, so
I have no objection to letting Mr. O'Rourke speak. Does anyone else have an objection?
We just say that we can double check the list for Luis after Patrick speaks.
That's a great idea. So Rosa, can you, while Patrick's speaking, could you look in your emails and see if you can find Luis Garza? And ensure that that name was correctly entered, or if someone with that name is on or not?
I saw someone named Garza.
Okay. Okay, in the meantime, let's let Patrick O'Rourke go ahead and speak.
Hi, I wanted to first of all welcome the new members to the Parks and Rec. I know that's a lot of time and energy you have to put forward to be a volunteer in your organization. And so I want to thank all the members for their service. My name is Patrick O'Rourke. I'm the Preservation Chair for Historic Boulder. I spoke to this group in February regarding the band shell expansion and what happened in June of last year. And Francis just spoke to that issue that occurred. That's not what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. Tonight in your docket on page 36, you have a recommendation from Ally, I believe it is, to go forward with a cultural landscape assessment for the Central Historic District. We discussed the opportunity to do a landscape assessment. The last time one was done in Boulder was Chautauqua, 20 some odd years ago, and it was quite comprehensive. The reason I'm bringing it up tonight is the recommendation from staff, I believe, is to have what is commonly called a CLA for the Central Historic District. I would strongly recommend that you expand the boundaries and take it to use the Greenway. In other words, back in 1910, believe it or not, there was a report given by a landscape architect, Olmsted, to the city of Boulder, using the creek as the boundary of future expansion for all the parks and recreation. That plan started on the western edge of town, which is commonly called Cannon Park, and it went all the way over to 28th Street. And I'm recommending and hoping that the Parks and Recreation Board, if they go forward with the COA, use those boundaries. And I'll tell you why. Starting on the west end, you have the Red Rocks, you have the Cannon Park, you have the Even Fine Park, you have the Boyd Smelter, which is part of the HIP, the Highland School, the Newsom Nursery, which you may or may not know was just designated along with the Silver Shadow. There's going to be 43 townhouses going up there. Then the Civic Historic District, which has 5 historic buildings already designated. And then the creek follows down past Boulder High School. And it keeps going all the way down to where there's going to be 2 projects going. One is the Millennium Hotel, and now the Harvest Apartments are both coming down. And Olmsted had that designed so the creek became, and thank you, I know I'm off, part of the path. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We determined if Dr. Garza is on the participant list here.
Present, but no ability to unmute.
What if you lower everybody's hand there?
Try that. Only see.
So you said you saw his name up?
I saw his name. Under attendees, can you search under attendees? Search under attendees for Luis. Happened with your all.
Okay, well, Dr. Garza, if you're still on, I apologize for the problems finding you. And if you could send us an email or be willing to give testimony at the next meeting, that would be great. We definitely want to hear what you have to say. Sorry if we lost you or we had some kind of technical issue.
Can you try one more time to raise his hand?
Maybe a search for Carson.
Dr. Garza, can you raise your hand? Oops, it just went down.
Something happened.
Check attendees one more time. It's hand popped up for me.
There he is.
Yeah, okay.
Wow, how did that happen?
It's the hand sticky.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, hallelujah. Sorry about that. I'm a boomer, so okay, boomer me. So my name is Luis Garza. I've lived in Boulder for 36 years. Wife and I raised our 3 daughters here, and we love Boulder, but I've noticed over the last several years a dwindling supply of tennis courts, meeting with an increased demand, especially when coupled with the explosion in popularity of pickleball during the pandemic, which seems to be continuing. Add to this the poor condition of the current lot of courts that we have, a lot of cracks and frayed netting. Meanwhile, Longmont, Niwot, Arvada, just to name a few, have built beautiful outdoor and indoor tennis facilities in the last few years. Both tennis and pickleball provide a lot of physical, mental, emotional, and social benefits that can last a lifetime, really. My passion for the game has allowed me to play local and national tournaments along with league play. And I volunteered my time I have a Dream Foundation to teach tennis to underprivileged youth, which I feel is vitally important. And so it pained me to have to tell some young Latino kids that were playing at the Knollwood courts that I had a reservation and they had to move on. It was really hard for me to do that. The nearest courts were probably 3 miles away. I don't think they probably had much money to book a court. The Rocky Mountain Tennis Center, which serves a lot of youth, along with wheelchair players, will probably be gone, along with their, I believe, 16 or 17 courts in the next year or two. So I'm hoping that by bringing attention to this, that can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that your department can develop a plan, maybe a public-private partnership of some sort to help with this growing issue. And I thank you for your attention and for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right.
And thanks for your persistence in getting them unfrozen. Appreciate it. All right, after public participation, we offer the staff an opportunity to comment on the public participation and ask for any comments from the crowd as well. So let's start with staff. Do you have any response?
I will say that we are working towards refurbishing tennis courts. I don't know, Mark, if you have additional information that you could share at this time on tennis courts and what's going on in the CIP in the near future.
Yeah, happy to, Scott. Thanks. So Mark Davison, Senior Planning Manager. I forget to do that now. But two things I'll update you on. First off, Tina Briggs, Senior Landscape Architect, will be doing a courts plan over the coming year, and that will assess courts across the system and look at where's the opportunity for potential new courts, how we collaborate with partners, what would that look like in a constrained action vision situation. And that plan will be ready by the end of 2023. So obviously we won't be making any major decisions on courts because we'll be guided by that plan, which will obviously come to the board and we'll be having numerous discussions on. So that's the big picture. On the courts themselves, from a capital maintenance perspective, when it came, was it a month ago or 2 months ago with the capital investment strategy, we noted that the proposal is to update court funding from previously at 200,000 a year to 400,000 a year. The reason we're able to do that is we're obviously pushing some more funding into taking care of what we have. And Jackson and Stacey will be chatting about that more in the coming months. So that's the sort of two major maintenance side of things, and then the bigger picture vision side. Thanks, Mark.
But there currently are no plans for developing new tennis facilities, right? We're talking about maintenance of existing facilities only.
Yeah, the only thing we had in the plans when I arrived here 6 months ago, we did have a proposal in terms of courts. When we think of pickleball and tennis, we did have a proposal in the pipeline for 4 pickleball courts at these communities. We're wrapping that into the bigger picture now as part of that planning effort.
And with the loss of the courts at the Millennium Harvest House, will all those courts disappear as part of the new development, or will the ones that are to the south of the creek remain?
To be honest, if Tina's online, she could give you more detail on that. What I would say is we are looking at private courts across, like the inventory across the system, to look at Boulder as a whole when we use this, is the possibilities for utilization ships.
And those were the only real indoor courts for winter use with their dome, right? So that's a real something we're really going to be missing in Boulder. Yeah,
we recognize that. I think Tina's come online there. If you want to say anything.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to add, just along with that, with the court study that we're looking at a court system study. So we're looking at tennis and pickleball. We know pickleball has grown and it's become a big part of the discussions. And then we also know CU South and the Millennium have major changes coming. So and in addition to that, like conversations with CU and the Millennium, what's exactly going to happen? Are they replacing some of the tennis courts with pickleball courts? There's the potential for that. But ultimately, we are in the very early stages of the sort of court system study that we know will finish up at the end of 2023. So that's going to look at a lot of things. It's going to look at what's happening right now and looking at the master plan and taking that as direction, but knowing that there's some new emerging things that weren't necessarily sort of highlighted as we were doing the master plan. So with Millennium and CU South, those are kind of big things in the in the community that are happening that weren't really addressed in the master plan. So we're going to look at that level of service, look at what's happening in our community, make some adjustments, and then ultimately come up with recommendations on what the future of tennis courts and pickleball will look like. And that should include things like continued maintenance, of course, but then any kind of new facilities. What is actually sort of the number that fits our community And our community we know is special and unique and is more active than a lot of communities. But comparing those to other very active communities and looking at outcomes, maintenance and new courts. And like Mark was saying, with the fiscally constrained action and vision, that gives us the opportunity to look at fiscally constrained. We know that's what we have the funding to do, and a process to find the extra funding to hit the action and potentially the vision with creative funding, partnerships, and that sort of thing. That was a lot. That was probably more than needed.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. Are there any, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to follow up on one thing you said, do we anticipate, and I know there are no plans in place yet, but do we anticipate that there may be court capacity added through the CU South development?
And Tina, unless you want to speak to that.
You can go for it.
It's an interesting thing. It depends. We don't really have a partnership with the university in place on that. There is an idea for a couple of neighborhood parks as that goes in. But at this point, there hasn't been any discussions on using universities.
Okay. Thank you.
I can say that in the study, what they'll look at is what we look at what would be the facilities, and that it will identify sort of partnerships that we should examine moving forward. So CU, BVSD, those sort of things.
Thanks, Tina.
Can I ask a question for your information?
Yeah.
So over where I live in South Boulder, I have cross street Fairview, there's a number of tennis courts on the grounds of the high school, those considered schools tennis courts?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are they available for public use?
So the way that the school district does some rentals, and so to be honest, I do not know, maybe Brian knows if they're available for the public to use after school hours. But it is BVSD's policy that their properties are not used during any time the kids are in school. To be honest, I have not ever seen any public access on those courts, but that I'm not sure if they rent those out to members of the public.
Just a quick anecdotally, as someone who lives across the street, they are well utilized at all hours by many people who do not appear to be in high school.
Okay, good to know.
But the Centennial ones do belong to the city?
Centennial also belongs to BVSD.
Okay, and then the ones that are over, I guess that's 34th Street?
Martin Park, maybe?
No, it's up on North Boulder. Kind of. I go like down Palo Park and then you turn on 34th Street before you hit J.
You said by Palo Park, like North Palo Park courts? There's courts at North Palo.
And on that other side of the street, on the east side.
Okay, let me Google Maps really quick.
I'm gonna guess based on that response that they're not city courts.
So there are two North Palo courts. So if it's North Palo Park that we're talking about, and two of those courts will be resurfaced in 2023.
Not those ones.
You said, what was the cross street, 34th? And
I think it's 34th Street, between Palo Park and J.
It's the easy way.
We can, yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Looking
get
into it,
back
get back.
into that.
The other one is called.
Because the courts that, so we on our website, right, we have like all of our tennis courts, and so obviously the courts at the rec centers, Arapahoe Ridge. The property line's like in the middle of the courts, I want to say, in that one, so that one's shared with the school district, but we manage it. Chautauqua, Columbine Park, Knollwood, Martin Park, North Palo Park, and Tom Watson Park. Those are all of our courts, or courts that are the property lines in such a way that the school district allows us to continue to manage them.
And then the one on the other side? It's just called tennis court. It's like winding trail drive from where Palo Park goes west.
Winding trail. So if you're looking at the ones just off of let me look at the cross streets, but in that winding trail neighborhood is a private HOA.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a number of private courts tucked in. Right?
So last year, maybe it was earlier, no, it was last year, we reviewed and approved a joint use agreement with BBSD, as I recall, that involved the co-use and management of some facilities on school district property, which I think includes some tennis courts, right? Like the Arapahoe Ridge Park and otherwise. Are there tennis courts that are on school property, BBSD property now that we currently do not have access to through the joint use agreement?
I let Brian jump in if he's available.
That's, yeah,
Sure, I can jump in on that one real quick. Yes, the only tennis courts that are on district property that we have access to are those ones at Arapahoe Ridge Park there at Eisenhower.
So those are the only ones we have access to.
Correct.
Okay.
We did, before we did have more access, but the school board at some point made it so that the school district is required to initiate all of the third-party use of their facilities. And Brian might be able to say that in the most accurate way, but long story short is they want to be in charge of who has access to their courts.
so we'll be meeting with the Boulder Valley School District on May 5th, both Brian and I, to look at the joint use agreement again. I'll take a thorough review of the joint use agreement and make recommendations for changes and start the discussion for renewal of that agreement. So that's coming up here just in the next couple of weeks. So we'll make sure to advocate for public access to shared facilities when possible.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on then to the consent agenda. And the first item on the consent agenda is approval of minutes from the March 20th regular meeting. And then they'll be followed by approval of minutes from the study session on April 3rd. So I will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
What did Jason say?
He's motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. So we have a second? Yes. Second, great. Okay, is there any objection to approval of the minutes as they are recorded? Okay, the minutes are approved. That was for March 20th, and then for the April 3rd study session. We may have a motion for approval of those minutes.
So moved.
And I will second. Any objections to approval of the minutes from the study session? Okay, the study session minutes are approved. Next up, we have updates from the Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation.
Absolutely. I wanted to mention within the consent agenda that April is Volunteer Appreciation Month, and you all are volunteers. And so we wanted to say thank you for the countless hours and service you provide to the community and giving us valuable feedback and information as we try and best serve our community. So I wanted to start off by saying that. I also wanted to provide a little bit more in-depth update. I mentioned that Scott Carpenter Park the pool will open on May 1st. We are now, and Megan could probably talk a little bit more about this because it's her team, but our aquatic staff is really in a great position this year, and we fired over 150 seasonal employees to work and operate the pools, which we are now at a level higher than we were at our highest point all of last summer. So what that means is we're in really good shape to be able to expand services to the community. We are planning on opening up Spruce Pool this summer, and we'll be doing some prep work here to get ready for that in the coming weeks. It will be a little bit of a delayed opening based on some of the maintenance. As you know, that pool has not opened in 2 years. And so there's once you add water to a pool that hasn't had water in it for a couple of years, you never know what you're going to run into. So we're doing a lot of maintenance and getting things going there. So excited about that. Megan, anything to add?
Yeah, no, just really excited. I have to say this out loud because I don't think most people understand this, right? Is that before we renovated Scott Carpenter, we never needed more than maybe 120 lifeguards to open everything. So getting over 150 for the summer, it's not only more than we had last summer, it's more than we've ever had in the history of our operations as far as number of staff, right? And with that said, I know that we still have limited pool hours now. Our struggle continues to be people with daytime availability. And so if anyone knows anyone who's willing to work for us just one weekday during the day, it can help make us progress going forward, right? We are working on that, but I have to highlight that because the staff really are working really hard, and we do have more staff committed for the summer. Not everyone on there yet, but as long as they work an average of 15 hours, just like last summer, by July, we had most of our pools full open, everything that we had committed to open. If we have everyone working at least 15 hours a week, which isn't a huge ask, I think we're going to be looking pretty good. And so right now, the average is they only work about 4 hours a week, but and we're not up to the 150 number for this month, right? It starts pretty much when they get out of school, but we're really hopeful, and I'm really proud of the team's work. And I know that this community's been really wanting to get back in the water, and we want to get everyone back in the water too. So.
But
Are we on pace? First of all, that's really exciting and congrats. That's awesome. So kudos to staff for pulling that off. Are we on pace to have full operation or to fully utilize Scott Carpenter Pool? Because I know last summer we had some areas that were cordoned off because we didn't have enough people running the pool, like the water slides were closed off while the lazy river was open. What's our kind of pace this year?
So we'll kind of have our final plan May 15th, just because you never know with some of these kids, like who's going to be on vacation for what weeks. And I certainly don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but based on the numbers I just told you, I mean, our first priority is always going to be Scott Carpenter. We can host a lot of people there. It's a really great place for families, adults, people of all ages. And so that's going to be our first priority. And so that lap pool, and you can tell that by us opening the lap pool early, right? And so that lap pool being open full hours and that leisure pool being open as many hours as we normally plan is our first priority. There's certainly some other tiers in there, like if we can add some extra evening time or some extra little hours in the morning, that's certainly something that we're working on, but I can't promise it quite yet. We need to look at how the schedule maps out, and we'll probably have an update after May 15th.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could update a little bit about diversity in hiring. I shared out the Parks and Rec job listings with the Boulder High Latinos in Action group, with the Adelante program. The parent of the Familias y Educadores Together, which is the Latino parent group. I was wondering if you got applications, and if you've had more diverse hiring or.
Absolutely, and I can jump into that. So we were just emailing earlier today our software that we utilize for people that apply for positions, Workday it's called, now will allow us to basically have the demographic information and where they found out about the position. And so we're working on gathering those reports at this time. We've requested that from our HR department. And so hopefully by next month, we can have an update and provide more information about the diversity of our team. We have made a big push with Summer Squad, our Matrix Team initiative, to really try and do all of our marketing videos and information in both English and Spanish. And I will also say that I'm very excited in that when you go on the BPR website in the top right corner, you can select any one of 9 languages, and our entire website is available in those 9 different languages. And so we're trying our best to break down some of those barriers from people applying for positions and just accessing our programs and services.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, let's move on to planning, design, and construction updates. And operations updates.
Yeah, we just discussed some of the operations with the pool there. Mark, anything from the basic updates from planning, design, construction that you'd like to share?
No, nothing unless there's any questions.
Okay, nothing from Jason? Nope. Okay, great, thank you very much. Next up is items for discussion information, the discussion of the P policy and budget strategy, which is scheduled for 45 minutes. So let's get into it.
Great, thank you so much. While Jackson pulls up the slide, we just want to thank the PRAB so much for your engagement in the study session earlier this month and on April 3rd. So the participation and feedback that we received was great. This is going to kind of reflect a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Jackson Height Business Services Manager. We are just going to go through this pretty quick. For those of you who were here last month, this is really just us recapping what we heard from you and clarifying the direction. As you're going to hear about our timeline, our next steps are to take this to a city council study session on May 11th, engage with the community connectors and residents to make sure that we are being inclusive to the overall community prior to making any updates. And then we'll report back. So just wanted to let you know that this is really more of a recap today. We're looking for what we didn't capture or hear appropriately. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy.
Thanks, Jackson. Well, Stacy Hoffman, budget analyst, operations. So tonight we are going to be looking at our timeline that we gave to you back in February meeting, reviewing our fee development processing goals, which we did look at the study session, but this is for the benefit of anyone who did not attend that meeting. And then we'll be looking at the study session outcomes and also some staff identified further action items that the PRAB has asked us to look into. We'll be looking at our program types, program benefit levels, and proposed cost recovery targets. We will be discussing the general fund subsidy level at a high level, and then we do have a few questions for you. As we do go through this, we just want to remind PRAB's role for budget development. PRAB shall make recommendations to the council concerning any appropriation or expenditure from the Permanent Parks and Recreation Fund, and PRAB shall make recommendation to the council concerning the proposed Parks and Recreation annual budget. This outlines our timeline. We are sitting here at the April meeting. As Scott mentioned, we do have 2 more touches in with the PRAB prior to the 2024 budget submittal. So we will be coming back in May. Mark will be giving a CIP second touch. We will be looking at the fee policy further, and at that point, we will give some preliminary 2024 budget review. Then in our June meeting, we will give a more finalized 2024 budget review, and we'll be asking for the permanent park CIP approval. So the top type of this timeline, PRAB engagement and PRAB involvement is on the top, and staff responsibilities are on the bottom with those green boxes. All right, we looked at the department's fee development policy process last month at the study session. And just in developing the fee policy, the department will follow the same approach as the master plan update. We do want to make sure that we have a lot of community engagement. We want to have an open and collaborative process with a focus on equitable outcomes. And we are working with communications to schedule the community connector, which will occur sometime in June. We are using the master plan as a guideline, and we are doing our research, again, looking at those national and regional trends, and then also making the process very inclusive with staff feedback and involvement. So we are looking into everything that was brought up at the study session, and we're doing a lot of financial data analysis right now. All this will be done under the policy guidance of our SCR framework, which is our sustainability, equity, and resilience framework. We are looking at the racial equity tool and the master plan from 2022. As you know, we've been very engaged with the PRAB throughout this process. City council input will be requested at the study session on May 11th. And then we will be looking at approval for the fee policy later in 2023, but doing a lot of work to align with that 2024 budget development. As we establish the fee policy, the key 2022 master plan goals and initiatives will provide guidance so that we make sure that we are definitely in alignment with community values. We want to make sure that we're reducing barriers, we're increasing access to our programming, and we're providing programming that is most important to our community within the resources that we do have available. So, you know, you hear a lot through us that we need to be financially sustainable. The master plan has identified a gap in recreation, and our fee policy strategy development is just one way to kind of reduce that funding gap. You know, as we look to establish a fee policy to set recreation on a sustainable path and forward, we're really looking to produce that one document that's transparent, it's consistent, it's simplified, so it's easier for staff to utilize, and it's also digestible for our community to understand. So that is our goal in this. And our subsidy levels need to be prioritized on how much subsidy we receive, our classification of services, community feedback, and also constantly focusing on those programs and services that do have the greatest community benefit.
I'll pause real quick and see if there's any questions. This is just a quick recap as far as where we've been so far. Okay, this is really what we had your help with earlier this month with the study session. We had identified 7 areas with fee policy or with set fees and without set fees originally. That was then expanded to 9 categories at the study session, and it became very evident that we left out the resale items. So we have established the 10 types of programs where we would have a cost recovery target, examples of those programs, and then the benefit level. Something we heard loud and clear was the confusion on the benefit level. So you will see that some of them have been updated to indicate they provide the full range of benefits. That's community, recreation, and exclusive. And then others say recreation or exclusive. This is really to account for the fact that some of these will not just fit into one category. There is the broad spectrum, and we want to clarify that there is that spectrum of community benefit that is provided. Everything in the top that doesn't have the red bar next to it is something that PRAB has weighed in on in the past 3 years, and there is very clear policy on. And those items we really aren't going to go as in depth on because we do have so much policy guidance from the various PRAB memos. Everything that's highlighted in red on the bottom of the page is where we feel as if there isn't clear defined policy that's been updated on a regular recurring basis. So that is where we are going to spend the majority of our time. What we have heard is the need for clearer definitions, defining all of the types of uses, and developing that policy with a cost recovery target associated with it. So we did hear that there is a desire to start with a set cost recovery target, and that will probably be the lowest that something starts. And then as a program becomes more of its full life cycle, there may become a higher cost recovery target, knowing that is something that requires less community benefit and is basically graduated onto more sustainable. So on this next slide, we do have more of the detailed analysis here as far as what we've told you. You will see that the examples remain relatively unchanged, as well as the frequency of review. These are the ones that don't have the set policy. So our goal is to incorporate all of these into the fee policy, which would then take effect starting in 2024. Something that we did add as well that I didn't highlight earlier is the open access. This is access to our parks, our playgrounds, our skate parks. These are items that or assets that we don't really ever see charging a facility access fee to use. We think that there is so much community benefit of parks and open space that there will just continue to be no fee associated with this, nor do we want to sit there and charge every kid to go down a slide.
That's the state park. Oh, skate park.
Skate park. And we do have 4 of those now. So any questions on these program areas? Okay, on the next slide is the types without a set policy. A lot of this is very similar. You will see that the bottom line was added. This is the resale items. We did try to provide a few examples. This is locks for lockers at the rec centers, food, clothing for resale that we have currently at the golf course and may expand elsewhere. And typically this is based on what our costs are for procuring these items and then selling them. We do have this as recreation or exclusive because there's things such as swim diapers that you really want as a recreation access. If you have a parent there at a rec center with a toddler and they forgot a swim diaper, you really want them to get in the pool and take advantage of the facility. Whereas something like a golf club, we may not provide at our direct costs. There may be some markup for exclusive access of it and just something that is considered more of an amenity add-on to the feature. So that is really the background as far as everything that we have covered. Are there any questions on these types without a set policy?
I do have one question. So I see a real tension. You already mentioned that these benefit levels exist on a spectrum. So there's a real tension between identifying things as being recreation or exclusive or community benefit level. And almost any one of these, they can argue that there's a community benefit to it. So for the user groups that are trying to get access to our facilities, how do we explain to them? How do we define where those edges are between the different categories? And how do we help the users understand how their particular activity fits within these benefit levels? What they can do about it, like if you did this, you might move to a different benefit level that would really reduce your access cost. I'm thinking of the reservoir, all the product masters and the rowing team, the clubs, and all that.
So the intention when we come back with the formal policy is to have a very clear definition that describes it, but then also the benefit level, identifying kind of the spectrum of those services and what is a recreation, what is an exclusive. And that is something that the PRAB would weigh in on. I know that several other peer agencies that we're looking at, they list out all 200 types of programs that they have, and that's something that they weigh in on upfront. I think the difficulty with this is as we expand or see new sports emerge, pickleball 10 years ago probably wouldn't have been on our fee policy whatsoever, that it will require some constant review and revision. But then with that, we did hear that there should be some sort of appeal process if there is disagreement over the categorization we have. And I think that staff has our own interpretation, and we're looking for the PRAB to give the final stamp of approval that everything, all of the services that we've currently identified and defined can fit into one of these categories, and you agree with where the cost recovery is. And that way it is clear to user groups, the average individual, where does a birthday party fit versus where does a wedding fit versus where does a private buyout of a pool fit.
Could you imagine like a scoring system or something? Is that?
Yes, I think we heard loud and clear. We wanted some sort of subjective measure to fall back on.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was just gonna follow up to that, say, I would like to see some criteria for what, exclusive groups are, for what community benefit is.
And I will say within our recreation priority index, so everything that falls under our recreation services, we do have the scoring matrix right now. What we found is that's incredibly difficult to apply to things that aren't typical recreation services, that are more rentals, more of the golf course access. So we're looking at how we can tweak that tool to apply to a broader spectrum of the overall program types. Did you?
Yeah, for the recreation priority index, which was approved by PRAB like in 2014, it is a measure of that exact thing of what is exclusive and what is not. And then in addition to that, what we have to do is say how much subsidy do we even have to then share out across these priorities. And so, I mean, I at least like to think that nothing that we do in Parks and Recreation is not some type of community benefit. The whole purpose of our existence is for the community's benefit, and so it does become, you have to prioritize things over others. We do have ways to measure that, and we have established practice and policy approved by the PRAB previously for specifically recreation services, and a lot of things on this other list do correlate, right? And I will say in best practice, third-party usage, it gets gray, but you can either do, a lot of people do it where it's always 100% or more cost recovery because it's not directly offered. But again, I think what this is doing is looking at it a little bit more more niche than we maybe have, which I think is what the community is asking for. And so that's, if that helps.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Stacy.
Sure. All right, so a large part of the exercise that we did with the PrEP was looking at cost recovery. Cost recovery, just you'll see CR. So just trying to get away from our abbreviations and acronyms here. So when we look at the study session outcome, we heard loud and clear that from you want to make BPR as available as possible to all, right? We want our programs and what we do here to be accessible to the community. So that is at the forefront of everything that we will be deciding on. We do need to clearly define those cost recovery targets per program area, and we will be looking at things that are specific and measurable and getting clear definitions for that. In the process, we'll be looking at simplifying that for staff and making it a little bit easier and giving them new tools so that they can plug things in a little bit easier and come up with those tallies. And then also what's so important is presenting that to the community and to the public when asked about it. We are definitely evaluating contract programming for youth groups that provide financial assistance. So it is a consideration that we will be working with those groups and just again, making sure that our programs are accessible and broadening that scope of participation. Further action that staff will be doing, we will be conducting the financial analysis for the proposed CR targets. So we are going through all of our programs right now, looking at where our levels are, looking at where we need to be, doing marketplace analysis, also looking at those benchmark communities and seeing how we do align with them. So that we can establish those clear cost recovery target range for each program type, and then also define that why, right? Which I think is some of your questions you've had tonight is why are we doing this? Why is it in that benefit level? And then we're going to be looking to create a simple visual to identify those cost recovery targets per program type. So working on that with our marketing team as soon as we get a little bit further on in the data, so that we'll have something that's visual to show the community. As we look at that graph, the BPR program categories, that is right out of our master plan, that graphic. So we do know the community surveys that we've done, and we have defined that more community will be at a higher subsidy level. Our recreational falls somewhat in the middle, and then the exclusive is more serves more of the individual, but has more of that low subsidy. So that is some of the guidance that we'll be using, which comes out of the master plan. Questions on that before we move forward? Okay, the moment that you've all been waiting for. This is the cost recovery targets, and this is the PrEP exercise analysis. So when we came to you at the study session with those big sheets of paper that I've been carrying around now for a couple of weeks, we asked you to kind of put your scoring on our different programs on where you felt that they would fall. And we asked you to basically look at no cost, low cost recovery, mid cost recovery, high cost recovery, and then 100+ cost recovery. We didn't really want you to look at the percentages. We had placed some percentages in there. This is a guideline because what I might think is a low cost recovery may be something totally different than what Jackson would think of. So we're just really looking at where you fell in those overall categories, not the percentages. So for the community, the feedback basically was that it would be no cost to low cost for most of the community programs, meaning that subsidy or taxes would provide most of the support for these programs or services. As we look to our recreation, it fell in the mid to high cost recovery, meaning that we would be funded with a balance of subsidy and user fees for those falling in that lower range. And then the ranges really did fluctuate, and we'll look at the details from low to high depending on the program service offering that we had. And then in the exclusive category, it pretty much consistently came through at high to 100+ cost recovery. So this means that those programs would be primarily funded through user fees, possibly with some subsidy report, depending on the program. And also that the PrEP did weigh in that some successful exclusive programs may exceed full cost recovery based on market conditions. You had graded some things. So we'll just advance now and just look at the individual results for the question.
So in my reading, this is 100%, is that 100% cost recovery or is it greater?
100 plus. So we did have a high cost recovery going up to 100%, and then we did have a category of 100%. So are there some programs that the department is offering in which we would be getting 100 plus cost recovery?
So you could have an exclusive program that gets less cost recovery than a recreation program for the current.
I think that is an area where you are going to see some overlap. A recreation program that is at its full life cycle will probably be at 99%, whereas an exclusive program that we are just introducing for the first time may not be at the full 100%. And that's an opportunity for us to be able to introduce a program, test it out, get people interested, and then get to full cost recovery.
And I want to say that this is just the summary of how, when you went through that exercise at the study session, where you ranked things and saw things fitting based on the program offering. Thank you.
And I think you all are highlighting the fact that there is some overlap, some subjectivity within these different tiers and types. So that is something that we are trying to further clarify. But once again, this is based on your feedback from the exercise you did. So our next slide is to show you where the rest of your peers landed on this exercise. And it was actually very interesting for us to go through and look at together.
Okay, so this is the proposed cost recovery. This was your feedback. Most of the line items, we will have a score of 5. There were a few where we only had 4 results in. So community programs that enhance the health, safety, and livability of the community and therefore require minimal obstacles to participation. For facility access, we asked you to basically rank access with financial assistance and then also facility childcare. And as you can see, most of the results fell into a no cost or a low cost recovery. We did have one person put in mid cost range for the childcare. So pretty much everyone was in the same 2 buckets on their results. As we look to the golf course, youth lessons fell from a low cost recovery through a high cost recovery. So there was a broader range of feedback on that. And then expand programming, which is programming for our people with disabilities, was either at a no cost or a very low cost recovery. So meaning that that program would get very high subsidy levels. As we move into our recreation services, subsidized camps. So those camps that were basically being provided for families so that they would be able to work. So in a childcare day camp was no cost or at a highly subsidized, so a low cost recovery. Expand again came in at that no cost to a low cost. And then ISI, which is our youth services initiative. So our programs for our youth in the community, again, a no cost or a low cost recovery. So all of these programs being more subsidized by taxes and a little bit by user fees. Open access, everyone was in agreement that it should all be no cost. Yes.
Why is expand listed twice? Why wouldn't you just have expand and then treat it?
So underneath the golf course, they actually do have a program for our expand group that goes out and uses the golf course so that they can learn to play golf and have an interactive programming. So it is a separate program that's run at the golf course, specifically to the golf course. So we wanted to gather feedback on how everyone felt that should have a fee to it or not, with golf being somewhat viewed as recreation or exclusive.
But the rest of the expand programs are all like
yes
in one area?
Yeah, no cost or a low cost recovery. So in the first 2 levels.
And we often separate out the golf course as a sort of a separate item just because it's so unique in its characteristics. It's isolated, it's a single sport, it's not multiple different uses, right? We generally tend to separate the golf out, separate from others.
And I think if you look at the golf course, there's community items that are provided in order to highlight with you what the example of the community benefits were at the golf course. These were just two programs that were the easiest to conceptualize to the broadest audience.
What is telling is most of everything is a no cost or low cost, with a couple of outliers on mid-cost recovery based.
My general recap is this is very consistent to what the current prices are, or cost recovery targets are for these program areas. So it seems as if there is a general perception that staff is doing what PRAB aligns with, but the next step is to actually get all of this into a policy and bring it back to you. So it's visual for community members as well as staff to understand the reasoning why behind it.
So during our study session, Jason and Anita were not present. Is there, do they have an opportunity to weigh in on these?
Do the exercise.
Yeah, I think that we can email them the exercise and ask them to complete it and fill it out. They've now seen the answer results. Results.
Hear that, Jason? You got homework coming, buddy.
Hey, I was at the study session. I did.
Oh, you were, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. It's actually part of the, isn't it part of the public record now? I saw that in the.
That's right. It was sunny.
Yeah.
So yes, we're more than happy to send that out to Sunny and Anita, and we'll follow up on that.
Jason and Anita.
I was here.
Sunny and Anita. Are there any other questions on the community side?
Okay, moving over to the recreation programs that benefit a broad range of users and are targeted to promote physical and mental health and well-being, where a lot of our programs fall in this level. As we look to the facility access or the facility entry, as we have updated that program type, looking at the 3 recreation centers, the group had weighed in on a mid-cost recovery to a high-cost recovery in placing access to the centers. Our outdoor pools mainly fell in that mid-cost recovery. However, we did have a high-cost recovery and a cost recovery of over 100%. And the Boulder Reservoir, looking at a mid-cost recovery with 1 person. The majority did fall in that high-cost recovery, and then also over 100% for cost recovery. So I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions or comments. All right, I'm going to move on to recreation services. Adult sports leagues fell from the low cost recovery, but majority did sit in a high cost recovery. Aquatics clinics, I think it was an interpretation of what that meant, anywhere from a low cost recovery through a high cost recovery for the programs. Gymnastics sitting in that mid cost recovery range. Then also being on the higher side and 100+ for 2 individuals. Camps sitting at that lower cost recovery through that high cost recovery. As we go down to special events, again, more that mid to 100+ range, specifically for the Halloween drive-in. We did have a low cost recovery, and then again, more on that high to 100+. Rentals and access renamed to rentals and reservations, looking at that sports field rental. 1 person had weighed in that it should be at a low cost recovery. The rest of the group had placed it more into a high or 100+ cost recovery.
My general observation with the recreation categories is this is where we saw the broadest range of input as far as what the cost recovery targets should be. And I think that this is an area that we struggle with internally as staff because there are so many varying aspects of community benefit, and it's not as clear and dry as something that is truly exclusive or truly community oriented. So it was great to see that there is the spread and broadness of opinion here. And I think this is the slide we would welcome any other feedback or questions on. Yeah.
So aquatics clinics mean teaching kids to swim, right?
No, for this one, it was focused more on
So if you had, well, yes and no, but more advanced. So if you had a swim stroke clinic, so not your entry level youth learn to swim programs. But if you were going to that next level and maybe taking the kiddos and preparing them for a swim team, right? And strengthening those skills, or if we had adult swim clinics or anything that would be more in that aquatics range. So special, a little bit more specialized recreation than your basic learn to swim, which we had on the community benefit.
That was not, I'm sorry. Okay.
So youth lesson,
it would fall under recreation services as entry youth swim
swim
lessons.
lessons.
Possible, I think that should be broken out as a separate category. I think it's important enough. I think it's a basic life skill that it's important to address how.
Yes. Every kid should know how to swim, regardless of their income.
This is like the first thing that I did as a member of this body, and I'm like, that was kind of neat. Go with that. I can't remember exactly what I put down for every single thing, but thinking about something like a reservoir where it looks like majority of us skewed towards higher cost recovery. I'm worried that we're not reflecting on uses of that facility and whether or not certain activities at the facility may be higher or lower.
With the facility access, this is specifically tied to the gate entrance fee. So the reservoir was an example where you could have various types of programs there. You have the facility access, which is your entrance fee. You have the special events of there's triathlons, Ironman, etc. You have the rentals and access for BAM, CU rowing, you name it, for some level of access at the facility. But I think that the Boulder Reservoir facility access is specifically to enter the facility, which is a paid facility 6 months of the year. But then what you do at that facility would fall under the other types.
It's really interesting when you talk about the reservoir because there's a lot of debate, as many of you know, as to what services should be provided by the city and what should be considered an external group. Larry spoke to it tonight with open water swim, and open water swim you could look at as being a more individual benefit activity, although we know open water swim is a great healthy activity. So the question becomes, do they fall under a rental group when they're outside of business hours? We certainly encourage open water swim from the time we open at 6 a.m. until the time we close. But when you get into the discussion of before hours, early setup and those kind of things, I think that's where this gets complicated. And what we're trying to do here is avoid giving you, how many fees do we have? 30,000 fees?
200
or 3,200 fees. So we could go through and pick each and every one of those, but I think this was just to give some general examples. Motorboat, boat storage, really this is just access to get in there. And so we've already thrown some things into the exclusive. I think there needs to continue to potentially be discussion with this group as to whether or not a group like BAM setting up and doing open water swim and community members are all welcome to come to that. Is that a exclusive access, or is that a recreation service, or is that a community benefit? Group members might argue that it's a community benefit. Ultimately, that's what we need your help in determining.
Thanks. I looking at this again, thinking about it more, I think I'm now shifting that perspective that just access to the facility for an individual I would probably put it a lower cost recovery. So we're going to monetize that person in other ways. Boat storage as discussed, potentially rentals.
Thank you. You're feeding us to the questions. So, any other feedback on the recreation side?
But if you qualify for financial assistance for the city ability to get it for free, go low income, then you should theoretically not being charged.
Yeah, I guess the question that I would have about that is that say, look, income person who might qualify, presents himself at the guard shack. How does that interaction go?
If they qualify for financial assistance.
Well, if they would qualify, but like maybe they don't know that there's a program available.
In 2022, 14% of all visitations at the outdoor pools, 3 rec centers and Boulder Reservoir were based on individuals who had a $0 fee pass.
So you have to have that pass in advance, right?
Yeah, it takes about 3 days, like from when you apply, submit your documentation. It takes.
And you have to know that the help is available and you have to know where to go to get it.
You can apply online or at the rec center.
Yeah, I'm just worried about the person who doesn't know this program and shows up.
They could make it more proactive in terms of telling people that the program exists, I think.
And the other issue with the programs is that currently there are hard limits on income. And we're trying to change that to have a more graduated scale. So that the more you make, you might still get some benefit, but not as much as if you didn't make as much.
That's a good change.
Yeah. That's correct, right? We're moving toward that system, but we're not there yet.
Correct. It was identified in the master plan as a key initiative. Okay, we'll move over to exclusive.
So exclusive programs targeted to specific individuals or user groups with limited community benefit. Recreation services such as boating at the reservoir was pretty much all in that 100 plus, going a little bit into high, and one person did have it at the mid cost recovery. Team gymnastics with more of the high cost recovery to 100 plus, and personal training, all 5 responses were at 100 plus for cost recovery for that area. Looking at the golf course, we have rounds of golf sitting more at a high cost recovery into a 100% plus cost recovery, and then range fees, one individual saying in a mid-range, and then everyone else putting it at 100 plus. We look at our rentals and reservations. We have rentals for swimming coming in at a low cost recovery. And then when it was in the mid-range, and then we did have the higher in the 100 plus for the other 4 answers. Sports field rentals came in 1 at the low, just flip-flopped at the high and the 100% in that category. And then reservoir rentals did come in at a high or 100% cost recovery. Our contracted programming, so contracted programming is programming that is offered with an outside partnership, per se. We have Goats and Gardens Camp at a high cost recovery. And then also Gonzo Tennis is another program that came in mainly at a high cost recovery, 1 for 100%, and then mid recovery underneath that. So again, this results kind of show that most of these programs should be supported mainly by the user.
Are there any questions or comments on this slide?
So Gonzo Tennis is children's tennis, right?
It's all over the board. They have everything from children's entry level mini mighty tighties tennis and pickleball to older adults tennis and pickleball, or individual or group lessons.
Right, because I could see a range of different sport levels for that kids getting.
So we do see that very common, different cost recovery targets for beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So that is something that we would incorporate into here of a beginner tennis lesson. You would probably err towards more of the additional cost or less cost recovery, and then a more advanced class for an adult, maybe on a higher 100% cost recovery.
Is Gonzo still teaching those classes?
Sometimes. He's still
My kids learn from him. There we go. Amazing.
He's still up there with it.
Any questions on this slide at all or feedback?
Okay, so all of this kind of ties back into the general fund subsidy. Currently in 2023, we are receiving about 2.1 million as a general fund subsidy. And we've identified that this really funds 3 different categories. Working from the top down on that chart on the left, you have the green, which is a department funded program manager that is supporting the youth services initiative. So once again, master plan directions really focus on youth services. This goes out into the community, primarily our manufactured home sites, to provide recreation where people live and reside rather than making them come to rec centers. Just below that, in the gray, you have financial assistance. This is the financial aid program we talked about, where you can get zero access fees to access all of our facilities. In addition to that, we do offer a $400 financial aid voucher for registering for registered programs, and then Play Pass also feeds into this with $250 per participant. Below that, you have age-based discounts. Currently for youth, we provide about a 40% discount compared to the adult rates. And that's based on the community feedback that it is important to develop lifelong habits at an early age. And then on the converse side of that, you have the senior discount of approximately 25%, or older adults. This is once again encouraging the lifelong health and well-being of individuals. So those are age-based discounts. And at the very bottom, you have access and inclusion. Access and inclusion focuses on Expand, which is our program for people with disabilities, as well as the YSI Youth Services Initiative. So currently, it is $2.1 million of funding that goes towards these community benefit programs. There was $500,000 as a one-time contribution in 2023. And without that, we would receive a subsidy of $1.6 million. So as you can see, there is subsidy provided, and we do have a limited amount of subsidy that we can't program every dollar to every program, as great as it would be to have low-cost entrance to every type of program and facility that we do offer. So what you'll see is how we allocate the funding is very consistent with what the master plan direction was. And we do look at this on an annual basis and really review it closely with the finance department as we go through the citywide budget process, since the general fund does help subsidize this. So over the coming weeks, we are working internally with our peers to understand more of the city's financial picture going into the 2024 budget development, to get a better understanding of what subsidy level will exist and how we can help further maintain our existing subsidy level without relying so much on the general fund. So that may mean that we have to further increase fees to help provide this ongoing subsidy to those who rely on it most. And something that you all had asked for was just benchmarking to comparable communities to understand what percentage of financial aid and scholarships is awarded. And that is something that we'll report back on. So I know that this is something that we always struggle with every year. Parks and Recreation views this as a community benefit, the full stack. We wish we could give more than the $2.1 million, but this does come from general fund funding, which is a citywide resource. So we think that we've done a very good job at telling our story and having the data and metrics and outcomes associated with this, or how this subsidy is really benefiting the individual users, but the community as a whole. And we'll continue to highlight those successes. Are there any questions on the subsidy?
All right, so with the fee development policy, we just have some next steps to share with you. We kind of hit this on the timeline, but on May 11th, that is the City Council study session. We will be bringing segment of the BPR fee policy to that study session, looking at those program types for that set policies, looking to get some council feedback, looking at the benefit levels just to make sure that we are in line, and then discussing some cost recovery targets. Moving into May, we will share recommendations for 2024 service levels and fees with the PRAB. I just want to let everyone know at that point, the fee policy will not be fully developed. So this will be a work in progress, but you will receive an update. In June, we will have our community connectors. So we did have a meeting with communications last week, and a date to be determined, but we will be bringing this to community connectors and basically utilizing the racial equity instrument to evaluate our draft fee policies. So we want to make sure that we are using that tool within the city to making sure we're being equitable and looking through all the lenses. June 26th is the next prep meeting in June. We'll be sharing some feedback, asking prep to approve a fee policy structure so that we can continue our work.
Yeah, I'll go.
Is there gonna be a separate meeting to discuss the financial aid program and kind of have that? Or is that all part of this?
I think that the financial aid program will probably feed into a bigger discussion at a future date outside of this. Currently, the financial aid program is fairly well established. We do receive grant funding to continue to support it. I think that the ask and lift required to look at a sliding scale or tier-based financial aid program is more outside of the scope of the fee policy update. But something that was identified in the master plan as a key priority that I think we addressed to do in the first 2 years.
I'm talking more, not about too much about the sliding scale, more about like the kind of operation logistics around financial aid and how it's marketed and communicated to the.
Yeah, I think we can definitely have that conversation. And so we'll add that to a future PRAD meeting to talk about separate from the fee policy. So I'll take a look at the calendar of presentations and what we have going on in each meeting and figure out where we can get it fit in there. Because I think it is an important piece. In the meantime, continue to communicate the opportunities and related to marketing and communication. That team reports to me within our department. So I'd be happy to just meet and hear feedback or thoughts. But we certainly want to share the whole the entire plan and how we're addressing financial aid with this group. So I'll add that to the calendar.
We can discuss that in the next agenda setting meeting as well. You put it on the outlook calendar. Would you mind giving just a really quick summary of the Community Connectors program for our new members?
Yeah. Communications and engagement works with community connectors. They're individuals around the community, typically from underrepresented groups that have traditionally not been involved in government decision-making or sharing feedback. They meet once a week on Friday mornings. They do receive a small stipend for their time. And they're really intended to provide that connection to other community members where there is already a close-knit community and community bond to share what the city's doing, to build trust, but to also gather feedback and hear what could make city services and programs a better resource to them. So it's a very two-way dialogue and an opportunity to ensure that the city is reaching out to those underrepresented groups. About a good enough summary.
Is there some type of like report or something that summarized kind of the feedback that you got over the past year and any changes that have been made as a result of community connector input?
This is the first time we've gone to community connectors since the master plan was adopted last summer. Community connectors are for all city departments, so I'm sure we could reach out to them.
Yeah, well, in the community, so the community connectors, they're paid for their time, but they're also acting in this capacity out of the goodness of their hearts, right? And so we don't try to go to them for every single ask or thing because it's you can overutilize a resource and you can burn a bridge, right? And we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we prioritize the most important things to go with them, to go to them for. So I know it, like as a whole city, we're really thoughtful about how we're utilizing the community connectors and where we can use other racial equity tools and toolkits that we have at our disposal.
So you go to them with a specific question. You don't just say like any input you have come to us and give it to us.
Correct. I think we get 30 minutes for a staff presentation and questions and then 30 minutes for answers. So it'll be quick. And I think the benefit to this is as Parks and Recreation individuals, we get embedded in our services, our acronyms, and there is a very thorough city presentation to break down the acronyms, break down the services, and get it as plain speak as possible. And for the individuals who are English second language individuals or don't even speak English, there is that communicate or translation available to them to help make sure that everything is understandable. Yeah, so we have 4 questions for you. I think that a lot of these have been answered throughout, but the first question is related to the revised structure of the fee policy. Just as a reminder, this is the 10 types identified here, along with the new names and benefit levels. You will see this at least 2 more times, so if you don't have feedback today, that is totally fine.
I think it's an improvement, so thank you.
Second question is just ask revisions reflect the board's input at the April study session. Bernie, I heard you had some areas of clarification, and we will send out the exercise as homework to both Sunny and Anita to gather their feedback as well. Is there any additional feedback surrounding proposed cost recovery targets? Jason, I saw you popped your face up.
Sorry, I just realized I was off camera, but no, I agree. Thank you for making those revisions from the conversation we had earlier in the month. I don't have any questions.
And then 4, is there any additional feedback related to funding community benefit recreation?
I think we had the discussion during the presentation. So
Okay, very helpful.
it's good.
Well, thank you, everyone. And do feel free to tune in to the city council study session on May 11th if you'd like to see city council's conversation related to this.
Thank you.
Next up, we have matters from the department, Pleasant View Access and Parking Improvements Feasibility Study. And there's no time written down on this, so.
It should be about 30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay, great.
Might go a little bit longer depending on questions. Yeah, happy to introduce this. It is the Pleasant View project. It's been in the pipeline for a few years. Douglas Godfrey originally in the planning department was running this project. We were lucky when Darren Wagner was able to pick this up as project manager last year when she arrived as senior landscape architect. Darren has a transport background, so that was helpful. We've also been working with consultants, the Fox Tuttle Transportation Group and the Salinas Group, and I'd just like to point out it's been a really good collaboration between our consultants and the EPR staff. The project has 3 main purposes: to address safety concerns within the existing parking lot. There is really major, I don't know anyone who's dropped off kids there or been there, very major safety concerns. And it's to encourage universal and improved access, multimodal viewpoint and accessibility viewpoint. And then to think about and provide options for overflow parking. So with that, I'll pass you over to Darren as project manager. Take it away and introduce our consultants.
Thanks so much, Mark. I just want to make sure that our consultants are able to share their screen. I know that Bill is working on that, and Rosa, I'm sure you're supporting him. So hopefully that'll come online soon. But as that's happening, I'll say good evening. Thank you for thanks in advance for the time. For the new members, nice to meet you virtually. As Mark said, I'm Darren Wagner. I'm just going to give a few introductory slides to set us up for this conversation with our consultants. They've done a really wonderful job helping us through the analysis and recommendations phase of this. Bill, if you could go to the next slide. Just to introduce how we've set this process up, it was originally, as Mark said, emerging out of this need to address the safety concerns that Bill will describe, as well as the parking congestion that's really having impacts in the surrounding areas, as well as for, our our community who's using the facility and out-of-town guests who are coming from elsewhere. And really knowing that the regional games and tournaments that we're talking about, it's very difficult because they do draw in visitors from outside the city and county and sometimes state, that they're not always as conducive to multimodal solutions as are sometimes other issues. So and now we're ready for the next slide. The purpose of the project is really meant to get at how we can advance the various goals that are in our various master plans. So for example, as Mark said, it's been a collaborative process that's also been with our colleagues over in the transportation department. So we have guidance in our master plan, as do they in theirs. There's also a citywide access management and parking strategy that has goals around, multimodal access and other ways of reducing parking demand. So we really try to integrate these as we move the project forward. And in terms of the process, there may be a little bit of a delay here, but we set this up with the first phase really being around, if you can go to the next slide, Bill, starting with this existing conditions analysis as part of this feasibility study. So I want to say that, as we've defined the effort that we're going through now, there have in the past, I think, been questions about, well, what is a feasibility study? It's really something that happens ahead of much engagement with the community. It's a way to see what options from a technical standpoint are on the table. Identify any red flags that may take certain things off the table, and help us understand what cost estimates can help guide conversations with the community before we look at implementation. So as we look at concluding this feasibility study, our next steps will be to then really reach out in more depth to our stakeholders in the soccer and rugby community, as well as the neighbors in the immediate surrounding areas. And then, as we'll talk through tonight, and you saw in the memo, we're looking at ways we may need to phase implementation. There's certainly some things we want to be able to move on quickly, some operational improvements, and there'll be follow-up for some of the capital improvements, follow-up design and permitting that will help us finalize our approach to some of the construction aspects. And what you'll see tonight is a description of these general concepts. Again, we're not making decisions tonight as much as really looking for your input and support and guidance as we think about these next steps moving forward. So with that, I'd love to introduce our consultants. Bill Cowron from the Fox Tuttle Transportation Group will be doing the presentation tonight. We've also been really supported by Leslie Huey with the Sanitas Group, providing the civil engineering and design concepts for us and cost estimating. So it's a great team. Bill, I will let you take it from here. And thanks again for everyone's time tonight.
Thank you, Darren. Can everybody hear me? Yep. Okay. Again, great job introducing the nature of the issues that we're trying to address with this project. Fox Tuttle and the Sanitas Group have done a lot of work for the city of Boulder in the past. We're certainly very aware of the access issues that exist around the Pleasant View Sports Complex, and we're very excited to be able to work on this feasibility study for you. Our first step in this project was to kind of identify the infrastructure around the site to help understand what the existing conditions would be. And this graphic kind of shows that the site, as you know, sits adjacent to 47th Street and north of the Diagonal Highway. It's a large set of multiple sports fields, and it has one main entrance off the east side. That is the only way to get in and out of the site most of the time, and all of the access is focused at that point. There's one access point off of 47th Street leading into a parking lot that has 416 parking spaces. as well as bike racks that will house 74 bicycles. There is a relatively good bicycle access to this site along the 4 Mile Creek path and along the Iris path leading down to the diagonal, as well as along the bike lanes on 47th Street. The one missing link in bicycle access here is the Kalmia Avenue, which is a major roadway leading out to the west and which does not have any bicycle facilities on it. There's also pretty good transit service in the area, primarily the Bolt service and Route 205. And we considered all of that in determining what access possibilities there would be for this site. Next thing we did was look at sort of the historic data. Fox Tuttle had previously done a parking study in 2010. At that time, 13 years ago already, the site was experiencing very high usage. There were times where it was close to 100% occupied. We also looked at the crash history internal to the site. We looked at a 5-year period of time. We looked at reviews on Google Maps for people who use the site. There are very many people who talk about their experience at Pleasant View Sports Complex on the Google Maps. Most of those comments are very positive, but when they came to access and parking, they were not. They were predominantly negative. And then we also looked at a variety of related plans that the Parks and Rec Department had previously put together. From that, we were able to put together a data collection plan. That data collection plan included looking at the parking utilization on the site. We went out and looked at that Saturday, October 15th and Sunday, October 16th. We looked at, again, parking utilization both on the site and then off-site in the nearby neighborhood and in the church parking lot. We also looked at bicycle and pedestrian access, both moving through the site and also, again, along the Kalmia corridor to understand what the conditions there might be and how that might be a limiting factor to people walking and biking onto the site. Some of our findings included that there were 4 crashes on the site. One of them was a serious injury crash. And this really relates to a very specific access challenge that exists on the site. The path system to the north and the path system to the south connect actually by going right through your parking lot. And there was a situation where a cyclist was coming through the parking lot off that path, was almost hit by a car, went down and was seriously injured. So that was very noteworthy. We also were able to determine parking congestion significant on the weekends, not so much so during the weekday, and most significant on Saturday, at least for the day, the weekend that we took a look at it. Saturday was significantly worse than Sunday. There did not, for this particular weekend, seem to be much in the way of parking impact on the surrounding neighborhood streets. But there was quite a bit of parking in the Calvary Bible Church parking lot. There was also illegal parking along Kalmia, illegal parking along 47th Street, and people parking in the Friends School lot. There were over 2,000 vehicles that entered the site. The site was at times, with 416 parking spaces, there were times when there were 500 vehicles in the parking lot. So that would be almost all, if not all, parking spaces full, and a tremendous number of vehicles circulating, trying to find parking spaces. And there were 17 different half-hour time periods that we studied in which the parking lot was over 100% utilized on that Saturday. Completely different story on Sunday. Sunday, the peak parking utilization was never more than 57%, and really didn't experience the same kind of challenges. So this drew us to a few conclusions. There is adequate parking and reasonable access during the weekdays. The challenges occur on the weekends. And again, based on this one weekend that we studied, it would appear that Saturday is much worse than Sunday. The parking supply is inadequate for that peak period. This results in significant congestion and certainly what we perceive to be safety issues for people driving, people bicycling, and people walking internal to the site, of which there was quite a bit of all. That inadequate parking in the lot resulted in a lot of off-site parking, particularly in the Calvary Bible Church, but also in some other undesirable locations. The design of the parking lot and the connecting multi-use path system to the north and south, again, requires people to walk or bike through the parking lot to move between these facilities. This creates a significant potential for conflict, and again, did result in one severe crash in the last 5 years. Because the parking lot only has one entrance and exit, there's a lot of congestion at times when people are trying, when like an event releases and another event is coming in. One entrance and exit is not much for the amount of activity that is occurring on this site. So, and then the fact that you're entirely focused on the east side with your main entrance, that requires a lot of out of direction travel for people who are walking, biking, or parking in places other than the lot. That is an impact to focusing all of the access on the east side of your site. And then last, this lack of bike and pedestrian facilities on Calmia are noteworthy. The city's low stress walk and bike network does call for there to be bike lanes, preferably buffered bike lanes on that corridor. There's no plans to do that at this time. And the data that we collected showed that the speeds on that roadway were very high, and standard bike lanes might not be the best bicycle facility to encourage youths to walk or bike to the facility. So with that in mind, our team, in concert with great staff from Parks and Recreation, were able to come up with a series of recommendations that we hope will help mitigate these access issues. This graphic, this just shows the total of all of the improvements, but don't worry too much about that. I'm going to go through each of them individually. The first thing that you could do is really more operational, and that is to lean into the availability of parking in the Calvary Bible Church and come up with some kind of more formal shared parking arrangement with them. Again, you've got 416 parking spaces in your lot. They have over 300 parking spaces in their lot, and they already are allowing vehicles to park there. They've been very generous. So some kind of an arrangement with them, I think, could go a long way to mitigating some of your access issues. We also came up with a few capital projects, both short-term and long-term. The first capital project is associated with the challenge of pickup and drop-off on the site. Today, the pickup and drop-off area just runs along the east side here, and when you are done picking up and dropping off, you are flushed into the parking lot to try and work your way back out again. That really adds to the congestion within the site. And so this idea is to create a turnaround area that would allow that to happen without people going into the parking lot and reducing that congestion by reducing that congestion, reducing the potential for conflict between people who are walking and biking on the site. The other thing that this would do is if you wanted to create other off-site facilities and potentially shuttle people from there to this site, something like what occurs at the Chautauqua site as part of the Chautauqua Access Management Plan. This would actually let you bring shuttles and vans onto the site, drop people off and circulate them through. That would be super challenging to do the way your parking lot is configured today. This improvement is estimated at a cost of $707,000. Other capital project which could be constructed in the short term is a vehicular connection south from the parking lot to Calmia. The primary benefit of this would be in concert with coming up with a shared parking agreement with the Calvary Bible Church. If you were able to do that, this would allow people to enter the parking lot, ascertain that there were not parking spaces available to them, move directly onto Calmia and move to wherever the overflow parking is located. Again, probably the Calvary Bible Church. And that would prevent them from having to go back out onto roadways like 47th, J Road, Diagonal Highway, 28th Street. It's not very sustainable to send people out and around when they could make a much shorter journey this way. So this is a possible improvement. It also involves making a path connection here. This improvement would allow people who are walking and biking along the gravel path here or out on Calmia to come and enter the site along the west side and not have to go around and through the parking lot this way. We think that would be a significant improvement as well. And then the last thing is that this alternative would allow you, if you were so inclined to add parking, to add in an additional potential 47 parking spaces here. If you did that, that would increase your on-site parking supply by about 11%. And the combination of all of these things has a price tag of $961,000. Two other lower cost improvements that we think could be done more in the short term, improving the ADA parking. You currently have enough ADA parking in your parking lot. In fact, you have more than federal standards would require. However, it is often used by people who shouldn't be using it. Or like in this case, in this picture, people will park in the access aisles. So some changes to the way that these parking spaces are striped, as well as constructing wider sidewalk / path adjacent to them, which would then allow them to backload, which is a very common way of ADA access at this point. These improvements would cost about $42,000. Another one would be constructing a new access gate on the west side of the site. This would address some of the concerns that have been raised about people having to go all the way around to the east side. It would also make a very direct connection to potential overflow parking at the Calvary Bible Church. So it would be an improvement well connected to your shared parking agreement with the church. And that would have a price tag of $41,000. And then there are some longer term capital improvements that we think have value to the Parks and Rec department, but also have value to transportation and mobility in general, and might be excellent projects for the two departments to partner on and to potentially pursue and receive federal money for. There's many different sources of federal money that these types of improvements would potentially be appropriate for. This improvement is a multi-use path bypass, which avoids the parking lot, wraps around the parking lot, and connects across the top of the access drive right here. This would completely avoid this connection through the parking lot here. We think that this is probably one of the things that you could do that would most significantly improve safety on the site. This is a project that was originated by Transportation and Mobility. They did pursue DRCOG tip funding for this project, but it did not receive it at that time. But we hope that in the future, the two departments could work together and potentially get some federal funding to cause this to occur. Also, I want to just note this crossing here, we're recommending that it be a raised crossing to make this a much safer crossing for people who are walking and biking at that location. There is a crosswalk there today, but it's not raised. And then the construction of a multi-use path along the north side of Kalmia and south of the site. We think that this could be a great improvement for your site's access in terms of building a piece of the needed bicycle facility network along the Kalmia corridor. Also of benefit to transportation, since it probably will be equitable, if not less, in cost than going and trying to build buffered bike lanes out on the street. This would actually be a protected facility, a much better low stress facility for this corridor. And we think this would, again, would be a good project for Parks and Recreation and Transportation and Mobility to partner on. This project also has the opportunity if you were so inclined, to create additional parallel parking along the corridor. That you could put in an additional 40 stalls along the Kalmia corridor there. The fact that you're building a multi-use path and bringing the bikes away from the roadway makes the parking less of a concern from a bicycle standpoint, and is really the reason why we would recommend it if you found yourself wanting to build more parking. So we looked at all of those improvements and we talked with your transportation staff about resources and timing, and collectively we came up with this phasing schedule. This is in your memo. Pretty immediately you could pursue a shared parking agreement with the church. If it was successful, open up the west side gate. Even if you didn't build the significant improvement, just open it up so that people could get through. I think with the expectation that you'd follow that up and construct the physical improvements soon thereafter. And then you'd want to implement that, and you'd want to monitor that and see how well people respond to that ability to park in Calvary Bible Church on a formally accepted fashion. Then also develop a packet of these short-term improvements to construct next summer, and then use this fall to do more engagement, more analysis, more design, and then again, actually construct them in the fall. We would anticipate that the drop-off pickup circle would probably be the centerpiece of that. But the real value of that drop-off pickup circle is to promote more off-site parking opportunities, and the vehicular connection south to Kalmia is one that really leans into enhancing the access to the Calvary Bible Church. So you would probably want to consider, of those two big, fairly expensive improvements, do you have funding to do both? Or if not, then which of the two should really be the centerpiece of these set of improvements? And then adding into that the West Gate access improvements and the ADA parking improvements on the site. And then, of course, the last piece being pursuing some partnership projects with Transportation and Mobility enhance the multimodal access to the site with the multi-use path that wraps around and with the multi-use path that goes along Kelmia. So we've moved at this point mostly through the feasibility study. Staff would now plan to go out and do some engagement with the community. That engagement would involve talking to the Calvary Bible Church about a potential shared access agreement. It would also involve talking with stakeholders and neighbors about these other improvements and getting their feedback on how appropriate that would be and potentially beneficial that would be. And then moving forward with this phased implementation plan. So your staff has developed 2 questions for you. Does the PRAB have input on the draft recommendations? Does the PRAB support the proposed phasing as described? And we thank you for this opportunity to present and look forward to getting your feedback. And Mr. Chair, I would ask if you'd like me to stop sharing or if you'd like me to leave these questions up.
I want you to leave them up for a moment until we get deeper into the discussion. Thanks.
Bill and Darren, can you see folks in the room just because hands go up? Should we let you know when the hand goes up?
Yeah, that would be helpful, Mark. It's hard to see while the PowerPoint is showing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay.
We have one question.
So I have 2 questions. One relates to the Calvary Church option and the other has to do with the additional egress point and additional parking spaces. So I'll first ask the Mount Calvary Church question. What you said that they have 300 spaces in that facility. What percentage could we realistically hope to utilize on a Saturday of those spaces, and how would that impact our capacity?
Yeah. Let me just move forward a couple of slides here just so I can get one number. So the Calvary Bible Church has 380 parking spaces in their lot. Let me go back. And they're just about evenly split between the east side, west side, and north side. When we observed on that weekend, there were about 65 vehicles parking there, almost all of them going to the ball fields on that Saturday. And we've also spoken with people who are responsible for monitoring that, and that is something that the church has been allowing people to do, is to park in that easternmost lot and access the ball field. So, with that in mind, there, I'd say there's a bit of a precedent for them allowing up to 120 or so parking spaces to be used. We didn't see that many being used, but the weekend that we observed wasn't necessarily the biggest weekend of activity that you would see. But we think there's probably about 120 parking spaces there, but all of the other parking spaces were empty on that Saturday as well. So Saturday seems to be a really great day for other people to park in the Calvary Bible Church. Sunday, of course, is when they have many of their services. The parking lot was much fuller on Sunday, and really nobody that was parking in Calvary Bible Church was going to Pleasant View because your parking lot was only half full.
And presuming that we could get 120 spots, as a floor or even as a ceiling, how would that impact the capacity needs of the current parking lot?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, and really tough to answer. Again, with the one data point that we have, I've looked at that point and said, it looks to me like you're in the ballpark of about 100 to 150 vehicles short on your capacity at the peak time, right? When you're when your lot is full, when there's 500 vehicles either parked or circulating through there, and when there's 65 vehicles already parked in Calvary Bible Church and 20 people parked out on Calmia and a bunch of other people parked on 47th and in the Friends Church or Friends School lot, it's about I'd say about 150, but that probably is low for what the parking demand would be if on, for instance, the days when you'd be running a tournament there, right? This is more of a league play weekend. Your tournaments are bigger than that and would have a greater demand, but you also don't have tournaments nearly as often as you have these league play weekends.
Yeah, it's a great question. If I could just jump in quickly, and then Megan, I think that you wanted to offer some input too. I just wanted to say that, we have opened up the conversation with the church just by way of some initial conversations with the office manager, and also spoken with Boulder County United in terms of, how their operations work and what they've seen over the years. And the church as it stands right now, they're really seeing this as, I think, an opportunity. They're not, from their own perspective, seeing any immediate impacts that they're trying to address. They wouldn't describe it as a problem for them right now, which is a great place to start a conversation. So I just wanted to offer that, and then Megan, see if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I would say probably more informally or on the past tournament directors. They have actually reached out to the church, and on those Saturdays, especially, the church, I think, has been willing to work with them directly to help with some overflow. Part of the challenge with that now is if you are a visitor of Pleasant View and you go into the lot from 47th, before you're even going to the church, all of a sudden now you have to go all the way out, you have to go all the way back down, you have to go all the way down the road, down to where Calmia meets 28th, I think, and then back up and then get to the church. And so it's, it's not ideal even for the people who have been using it. You can see, like, on a random Saturday, 65 people parking in that lot and going to Pleasant View. They probably are the people who normally know that they've been able to do that. If you're coming from out of town, you don't know that. And you also have no idea how to get to that lot, and you're not going to drive 3 miles out of your way to find it, is what we've kind of found.
And I apologize. I realized there was an important piece of information I forgot to convey in the presentation. The vehicular connection alternative that would connect your parking lot south to Calmia, the intention behind that is that would be one-way southbound, and that would only be open on the weekends when these events were occurring. The intention is certainly not to create a vehicular connection that would allow people in the neighborhood to go back out to 47th and vice versa. I can't imagine that would be something that the neighborhood would be at all interested in. This is really just something that would allow people in the parking lot to move south on the weekends and connect to Calmia and avoid the travel that you just heard.
And then that's a good transition to my next question, which should be hopefully briefer. On your proposal to have that egress point to Calmia and add the additional parking spaces, it looked to me like from the map, there would be a new path that crosses over an existing multi-use path. And I'm wondering if, and I could be wrong about that, but I'm wondering if you considered the collision risk associated with that option.
Let me go to that map real quick so we can talk about it. I believe you're referring to this.
No, it's the other side. It's where the brand new egress point is out to Calmia, right there.
Oh, right there. Okay.
Crosses the gravel path.
There's a gravel path there, which I presume is usable by walkers or bikers. I'm wondering if you guys have thought about the collision risks associated with that.
So that gravel path largely serves as the only way for people walking and biking along Calmia to come up and access this trail and then get onto the site. if you were to build this pathway here and connect into the site, it would be our expectation that that would be the dominant facility that people would use to walk and bike. Now, if that's not the case and there were still to be people coming along here, then I think you would probably want to put a crosswalk here and try and address that potential for conflict with an appropriate traffic control device.
Okay, thank you.
So related question. Do we, maybe this is more, well, just asking whoever wants to answer the answer, but what kind of impact are we looking at on Almia in terms of increased traffic with this additional egress on Saturdays when it's open?
You would expect that there would be some impact. You would expect that there would be additional traffic that would, if there were more people coming and parking at the church, then there would be more traffic on Kalmia. That's the way they would get there. The advantage is that that would be happening on a Saturday afternoon when there's very little traffic on Kalmia. And I guess there'd be two ways of looking at that. There's very little traffic on Kalmia, so you can add more traffic to it, or there's very little traffic on Kalmia, and so it would look quite different.
Can you quantify the change at all?
No, but it's, I mean, not specifically, but it's certainly in the hundreds of vehicles per day, not in the thousands of vehicles per day.
One of the things oh, so sorry, I was just going to add that, in the proposed phasing and even just recognizing the limitations of this study, as Bill said, this was one weekend in time. It was not a large regional tournament that was being held that weekend. So we have opportunities over time to monitor conditions and collect additional data. I'm sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so to monitor conditions over time. And so that's why, especially because when we look at the 750,000 that we've initially programmed into the capital budget to advance some of these, we certainly can't achieve all of the capital improvements at once. And so the proposal is to work with the community and stakeholders and yourselves to try and come up with something that we can phase and then watch what happens and make adjustments over time as needed.
I'm sorry, I have one more unrelated question. What are we as a city and recreation department doing to encourage carpooling among our rec leagues and our tournament play when possible? Okay, because that seems like, we can build parking spots forever, right? But that's a zero-sum game.
Yeah, no, so I will say that we have over the years with specific tournament directors, especially when it's a really big one, we've done everything to up into not just asking them to carpool or organize that kind of thing, but we've also we've gone so far as like trying to get them to work with hotels that might be that might be hosting them. We've called NCAR UCAR, which is nearby, to try to see if we can do overflow parking there. To be transparent, it's been a challenge for a long time, but we normally only get complaints about it over about 3 weekends, and it's really one that's really bad. We've also worked with tournament directors to change how they do their scheduling to kind of help it as well. So I think all of the creative solutions that we've thought of anyways, I know historically we've tried some things we weren't able to implement because we were drafting kind of a special event policy for anything over a certain number of users or people visiting. They would have to implement certain practices in addition to their tournament plan, right? Like how are they dealing with the overflow traffic? So I think the easy things we've definitely done, things that are a little bit harder, we started to put some of the ownership on the renters. During the pandemic, the problem went away a little bit, but it's coming back with a boom, just like everything. So.
I spend a lot of time in that facility. I also live right next door to it, so observed everything going on that you've described for a long time. So I have a bunch of different questions. In the new roundabout that you described that takes out like that flat area on top with the trees, is there a lot of families like go up to that tree area to get shade because there isn't much shade in the Pleasant View facility? Is there a plan to replace shade options at all?
You know, I could just say that because we're still, even though those look like pretty defined drawings, we still have a number of details to work out, such as tree preservation, and even the center island within that drop off. We know it does need to filter stormwater to some extent to accommodate the design, but how we program that and whether that includes additional shade, for example, could still certainly be considered.
I would also add that, and Leslie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the cost estimates that were put together did include a fairly robust landscaping budget as well, which would
That's correct,
support
Bill.
everything that you just said.
Yeah, we did include, we did identify potential trees that may need to be removed, but we also added budget to make sure that we could add trees back in.
And it's fair to say, isn't it, folks, we do a lot of work on shade shelters. So it's a great point you're making, having the local knowledge on site, so we'll be assessing.
Okay, and then the second thing, I think that's great that it's only a one direction thing open only on certain times because the cars do tend to shoot down Kalmia like super fast, thinking that they're gonna get out to foothills there, and some of them end up turning around. Some of them I've even seen them crash and bend like at nighttime because they're going 100 miles an hour and they just smash into that endpoint. So I think that anything that you can do to mitigate speeds on Kalmia would be good, like speed bumps or something like that, because that cars just see that as a straightaway. There's no turnoffs, there's nothing between that roundabout and where the church enters in, so the cars just go like for it on that section. And the bike path that you mentioned on the north side of Kalmia, where would that start? Because like the lack of the bike lanes on the side of Kalmia goes all the way down to 28th Street. So if you just take it to the church, they're still stuck unless they go back onto the other bike path that goes up north.
Yeah, totally understandable. What we had shown was a project that would only build the multi-use path adjacent to your property and over to that street that connects into the neighborhood, whose name I forget. You're absolutely correct, however, that in order for that to be truly valuable, there would have to be bike facilities that can extended all the way west to the 28th Street intersection. But I would, and that is something that is shown in the Transportation and Mobility Department's low stress walk and bike network plan. There just isn't any plans to construct them at this time. That, according to our conversations with them.
And then my last question or comment was that the path from the Calvary Church to the soccer field goes through this property that belongs to the HOA that I'm part of that HOA, and there's, well, that HOA is like a bunch of different communities, then it has a master HOA, and that community that owns that path is kind of crazy. And they're very protective on it, and they try and keep the soccer parking people off that path. They're like, think that they own the path and want to control. So I just wanted to like make you guys aware that they are unreasonable and feel like no one should walk on their path.
That's super helpful context, and certainly as we move forward with engagement, any guidance or recommendations that you have, we welcome. Yeah, thank you.
Jason, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. I had a question kind of along the lines of Bernie's question on carpooling. Just another, not really question, maybe observation, and I'm not sure a solution, but something to maybe think about. And I'm sorry if I missed this. I had to step away for a few minutes if you all talked about this, but I have two kids that play BC United. We're there a lot of Saturdays. We try very hard to bike. It's a nightmare. All the things you all talked about. One of the things I notice every single weekend is very large SUVs and trucks that fit into like 2 spaces instead of 1. And so that obviously limits parking. It makes it difficult to kind of navigate around. And I don't know how you know, without discriminating against very large trucks, but maybe there's a way to, kind of send some of those guys over to overflow parking, because I really think that is a big part of the problem on normal soccer fall weekends, is just navigating the trucks that take over two spots that, take 5 minutes to back out. And again, I don't know how you do this in kind of a non-discriminatory way, but that's something to think about as we kind of think about a policy, rather than, as kind of Bernie said, we can continue to build or kind of find new parking. But I think there's ways to kind of fit in additional cars into the existing facility without building more. And I think finding ways to do that, again, whether kind of directing certain cars to other places, or maybe putting those cars in a certain part of the parking lot for oversized cars. It just is a problem every single weekend there. And like I said, we try to bike, so I just notice it. But and like I said, if it's something you all discussed, sorry for chiming in late, but it's just an observation that may be worth further exploration as you all look into this.
So I'd like to add one comment or a couple of comments. I could talk for a long time on this, an hour or more. This is deeply triggering to me because I used to live there, a quarter mile north, and my kids played soccer there. And I spent a lot of time biking through there and walking through there. I've had a number of run-ins with drivers in the parking lots. It's deeply dangerous. It's not a place to take kids at all. So I appreciate Bill's suggestion for improvements to the parking lot down the road, for making it better for multi-use access. That's great. But what's missing from this whole analysis is a robust transportation demand management approach, and really being aggressive about reducing the number of cars that are coming there, requiring carpooling, enforcing it, charging for parking. If we think about the equity arguments we were having, or discussions we were having earlier in this meeting, we were talking about a fairly exclusive user group. We're talking about spending upwards of $1 million to improve access on 3 weekends a year for an exclusive user that's serving mainly out of town guests. And I don't see how that's rational given our budget limitations. So I'd like to, before we begin looking at physical changes to the infrastructure there, to think more about how we can change how people are using it. And that'll be the first approach I would take. And then if we've exhausted all other options, then we start looking at expanding parking and increasing access. But that would seem to be, given our city's climate goals, our transportation goals, et cetera, increasing the amount of parking and making it easier to get there by car seems like the last thing one week at this stage.
Chuck, I appreciate your sharing that, and because I did want to revisit the second question that Bill still has on the screen in terms of the proposed phasing, recognizing again that we are part of a larger city that has these larger goals. The proposed phasing, as we've described it now, saves that on-site parking expansion sort of in abeyance until we know we need it. That first we would look at really addressing the safety concerns by providing that improved drop-off pickup circle, which would sort of separate out the traffic in such a way and provide that raised crosswalk that would reduce some of those safety issues. And that, if you think about the sort of bang for the buck in terms of public investment, that if we can secure a parking agreement with the church that, provides us, let's say 120 spaces, that is, relatively speaking, better bang for the buck as it compares to adding 47 spaces on site. So, and we have heard similar feedback from our transportation colleagues. I think the challenge that we run into is that, it's like, as Megan described earlier, it's these regional events that they draw people from well outside the city. And that, as Bill described, I mean, we can certainly make use of the Calvary Bible Church if we get the agreement in place to suggest that these large events have to use those spaces. But if we were to explore any operational agreements with NCAR, UCAR, for example, or other places that would require that shuttling back and forth, that wouldn't even be feasible without that drop-off pickup circle. So we're sort of trying to see this as like, how do we achieve all of these goals as best we can? Yeah, but I recognize, I hear you, I appreciate your comment, certainly.
Yeah, I'd say start with TDM first and then see where we stand. Transportation demand management, carpooling, charging for parking, things like that. And then let's see where we stand. And whatever we do, the user group should pay.
I'm curious. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, as someone who also uses this for kid soccer. I think a lot of the issues could be mitigated by just having more openings around that soccer field. I'm just thinking of like, if everybody is trying to get to that one entrance, it just creates anxiety. It creates, you know, hurriedness. And I know for myself, if I could walk the kids on one side, I would park them way at the end. We wouldn't all try to get as close to the entrance as possible because there's only one entrance. If there's another entrance, we would park way at the end and not be crowded and not be hurried and not worry about getting out. I think having that one way to Calmia would be really helpful. Like those two things, I think would solve a lot of the problems, just having more entrances without a whole lot of resurfacing, but just literally opening up gates so people could walk or bike and not have that extra traffic, but also the exit through Calmia, even on a Friday night where it's not super busy. I don't think the neighborhood would feel that much increase in traffic, but I do think it would lower the level of anxiety and, you know, hurriedness that's happening in that parking lot. Just an observation on my end, and then, you know, 2 porta potties would be great too. On the other side of the field.
Yes, we heard that from BCU as well. You know, one of the things that we also failed to mention is that, you know, the parking expansion can be separated from that vehicular connection to Calmia. Those can be independent. So, you know, we could provide that additional connection, work on the shared agreement with the church, continue the TDM that we've been working on over the years, and see how it goes. And then if we decide at some point and we find the funding at some point to expand parking, it's designed such that those 2 aisles could be added either side of that vehicular connection. So I just wanted to make sure that that was understood. And I really appreciate the way that our consultants have helped us think that through.
And it's fair to say, isn't it, Darren, with the upcoming engagement process, there'll be a chance to incorporate the board's feedback tonight, and then obviously the public's get your points. Chuck, improving knowledge of like events at the site, etc. And then from that, the next phase in design should incorporate that, but it'll be a design like the Bill mentioned the Chautauqua camp program. Like, how do we incorporate all the different aspects of this from a programming, not just a design?
Why do we need a turnaround? Like if there was a shuttle, couldn't it come in one way, pull into, I guess what's now marked as like the fire lane? That sort of acts as a drop off, and then it could just go right back into the flow of traffic and out Calmia.
It is, we'll obviously take more looks at it, but my understanding, Darren, feel free to chip in here, but as the engineers working on this, have done the most design possible. You know, looked at all the safety aspects, which is key here.
But I feel like if there's a circle, then it's gonna create a traffic flow issue.
Yeah, so typically what we found, and Bill, I know you could speak to this better, but you know, is that as soon as a shuttle enters a lot, it sort of all bets are off. And so the efficiency can really tank in terms of the system as a whole, because times can be impacted. So I appreciate what you're saying. I think that the way we were thinking about it is that the drop off would be, because it's well designed to have enough space, that there would be a consistent way, even if if all of the drop-off spaces are taken, there's still room for a van or a shuttle to make its way around and out without having to deal with the parking lot itself, which would really even more impact the efficiency.
Yep, you said it perfectly, Darren.
Are you looking at opening anything up on the north side in terms of bicycle access or pedestrian access? There's like a gate that's sometimes open, but there's no way to put, like, people just put their bikes on the field.
They climb over the fence.
No, I mean,
No, they do. I've seen them climb over the fence to get there.
yeah, that's on the west side.
Yeah.
That people go like through the fence, but on the north side, there's a door, but there's just no bike parking there.
We did not look at that, but we certainly can. That's a great comment.
Okay, we're at 10 minutes to 9, so I think we should probably line things up here. Thank you very much, Bill. It's good to see you again.
Great to see you, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Darren and team.
Okay, up next, we have matters from the board. We have handbook revisions, which I think Elliot can hopefully provide us with an update when he's on that.
Yeah, so really quick update. I provided the handbook revision drafts to this office. I spoke with Sandra Yanis at the attorney's office for quite a while about the revisions. She was very thankful for the revisions, and she had hoped to have proposed comments and edits back to us by this meeting, but because she's wearing so many hats right now for the city, she wasn't able to meet that timeline, but she will have those comments back to us for the next meeting. And then I can work with her on what next steps need to take place before we can bring another draft back to the full board. But I expect that the next meeting we will have a draft that removes the red lines that we can present to the board for review.
Great, that sounds wonderful. Thank you for all the work you've been putting in that. Sure, it's been a time.
You bet.
Any other comments on that? Okay, we have advancing racial equity training. I received an email, I don't know if the rest of you have, about signing up for racial equity training. Do you know to whom that has gone, Rosa?
I can check, no, but that was actually a bullet point that I was going to speak to you all about. So yeah, the racial equity team has provided virtual and in-person meetings. They are sharing with you May and June virtual trainings, meetings. The sign-up link is provided. So we urge you to sign up. So Chuck, to your point, I don't know who all made the list. I don't know if our 2 new members were already added to the citywide list when it went out.
Is it a separate email?
I didn't get it.
I received a separate email, but would you, Rosa, would you be willing to send an email with a link to all the prime members?
So the link is in the packet.
I don't send the pack of it, didn't call it out as a separate email, just so we can find it more easily. If you don't mind. And I did sign up. There were several of them that were already full. Every slot was full, so.
Okay, and so this is just some early spring training. They are going to be adding more sessions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful. And then we have next is PRAB Matters, and this is an opportunity for members to discuss interaction they've had with the community, any topics they'd like to bring to the attention of the agenda committee for consideration in future meetings, and other large items that would not be appropriate for just a direct communication with members of the department, like the water fountain here isn't working. Not something we need to discuss in PRAB, but something that needs to be brought to the attention of the department or inquirable.
Yeah. I just want to share that I attended the South Boulder sort of feedback informational gathering to share ideas for future rec center, and had a great conversation with Tina and Charlotte. And the highlight honestly was talking to 2 sophomores at Fairview super intelligent guys who were down there on their lunch break playing basketball. And were really receptive to my questions about what would they want. And they came up and shared their thoughts and put their ideas on the board. And we're really bummed that, you know, these improvements wouldn't be there during their tenure at Fairview. They'll probably be graduated. But it just really made me feel again that, you know, we need to be proactive in getting the students at Fairview involved in that process, and really the students at Southern Hills and Mesa Elementary at this point, because they're going to be the ones who are directly, you know, benefiting. But the community partnership between BVSD and the rec center in that specific location is just so ripe for, you know, taking some steps to really make it what it could be, you know, and to have a place for kids to go during school. Instead of going down to King Supers and just kind of wandering around and eating junk food, like there's just so much there. So anyway, that was a highlight for me, and was glad to just participate in that and see that there was a lot of participation.
Right. Or on Pratt Matters, it's an opportunity if you have any interaction with the public or anything you want to provide as a future agenda item.
Thank you. I don't have anything.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Okay, and then finally, we have a new member welcome letter. There is a letter in the attachment, so I encourage the new members to look at it. It has some good links to materials. And if you have any comments or suggestions for improving it for future new members, we would very much like to.
I think I received that.
It's in the attachment. It's an attachment to the to this.
I did not receive this material. I was gonna ask you about that.
Oh, okay. So sounds like Bernie didn't receive the packet link. So when you receive the invitation to this meeting, there is a link to the packet in that email.
Okay.
And that has all the information that.
Okay, so that's
Every month you'll get that email and there'll be a link to the packet. Which takes you to the city website and then you download the packet.
so that's not murder.
No, it's fine. That's something we need to have a welcome letter that explicitly says, look for this email. It will have packet information in it. So that's something to take note of.
And mentor, right?
And mentors is the other thing.
It's fine. Been having a hard time coordinating. We're gonna make it happen, right? Just
So do we have, Anna, do you have a mentor right now? Great.
We connected.
Excellent. So mentors are established.
just to be clear, though, I got the invitation from you, Rosa, and it's on my calendar, but there's no link in this meeting invitation. And this came through some weeks ago.
Okay, so Bernie, so on Wednesday afternoon, I sent an email to all of Prav and I said something to the effect that your packet's posted online with a hyperlink. We'll be meeting at such and such address.
Dinner will be provided.
Dinner will be provided. So right about 2:00-ish in the afternoon on Wednesday.
Last Wednesday. I'll double check, but I don't think I saw that email from you.
Okay.
So that's where I include it.
Okay.
If you don't have it, please get in touch with Rosa to make sure that glitch is fixed, because we definitely want you to have
He's
the
already,
packet.
he's already on our Prav.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take it offline.
Anything I've forgotten? Great. Well, then, there's nothing else on the agenda. We will adjourn the meeting. And thank you all very much, and congratulations on your first meeting.